Hey, 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 good morning, Grand Rising, you beautiful souls. How are you? Welcome to Wake Up with me, Sonia Poulton, and guess it's Monday, the 12th of January, 2026, and I am very grateful for you all. I was looking and reading some of the comments on some of the recent videos, and honestly, it touches my heart. Some of the messages and expressions of appreciation that have been given to me are extremely touching. And I appreciate you. And I appreciate you all in the live chat this morning. How are you? Welcome to the show that knows you can ask for more. Okay? This is not Oliver Twist, and the universe is not on a budget. Dream big. Yes, indeed. Good morning, Jacqueline. Morning, Randy and Stephen and DJ Markson and June and Sonia and John and Sean and Merv. How are you all? You beautiful, beautiful people. Thank you, as I say, for being here. However you're watching us, I appreciate it very, very much. Hello, KR. Hello, London lady. Hello, Kira. How are you, darling? How are you all? Thank you, Markson. I appreciate that. So what is on Wake Up today? We will be talking about the criminalisation of protests with the Crime and Policing and Public Order Acts back in Parliament this week. Plus, what the hell is going on in Iran and why is there a blackout? Plus, we'll be looking at the government's failing assisted dying bill. And X and Ofcom feels like a psyop. If it walks and talks and smells like a psyop, it's probably a psyop. And Macrons versus Owens. There's a new ruling in France. Will that help or hinder Miss Candace Owens? And there's the CPS have drafted guidance for a potential circumcision ban, which has been met with uproar all around the world, as you might imagine. My guest today will be Councillor Kelly Oliver Dougal. She'll be talking about trans widows. You know what they are? They are the wives left behind when their husbands suddenly decide that they are women. We'll also be talking to lovely Clive de Carle. He hasn't been with us for a very long time. And we'll be talking about his last year and how to make your 2026 your healthiest yet. Sounds good, right? And if he can, John Curtin from Camp Beagle will be joining us. But there's no saying whether he can or not. The last time he tried to join us, he picked up the link from me and 5 minutes later the police arrived. So we shall see. And I will also be looking at, remember that event around a New York synagogue 2 years after? It was actually the anniversary on the 8th. So I think it was Friday, wasn't it? Or it might have been Thursday, but it was the anniversary. So 2 years after that, I'm going to be looking at that and what has happened since, because it sort of fell off the newsstands, didn't it? And I just want to say, really, don't be fooled. I mean, I genuinely believe that Elon Musk and Keir Starmer are actually on the same team. And I think most people who's done any research would conclude that as well. Plus, I want to talk about Debbie. Debbie is the type of woman who we consider the salt of the earth. She worked for this company, Jacobs, for 45 years. Wait until you see what she was given as a leaving gift. And I'll be looking at your shout. Plus, the final word is sit with it. The power of not reacting. Plus, I have a competition for you because I know you people love that. Yes, indeed. Thank you for being here. We do news different around here. And you know why? Because someone had to. Absolutely. Whose birthday is it, kids? Whose birthday is it, kids? I see somebody say, happy birthday, Robert. Grand Rising. Happy birthday, Robert. Thank you, Danielle Krause, for that early super chat. I truly appreciate your generosity. Happy birthday. Not to Danielle, to Robert. So let me just see if any of my guests, no sign of John yet, but who knows, may well join us. So let me just talk about what's happening this week in Parliament. Well, Parliament are debating and amending legislation which is related to the public order, to protests. It's primarily through the Crime and Policing Bill 2024 to 2026, and also new regulations under the Public Order Act 2023. There are key developments currently taking place in Parliament. Now, we've known for at least the last year and a half that there has been a very serious crackdown on our ability to actually sort of generate any form of dissent against the globalists. Well, this is exactly what the globalists want. These debates and these updating of legislation. So let's have a little look at it, first of all. So they'll be dealing with the statutory right to protest. So what we have is Lords debating amendments such as introducing an express statutory right to protest, requiring public authorities to facilitate peaceful demonstrations. Well, that's already there, right? And let's be clear here. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about now is already covered in law. But that's not the point about updating this stuff, right? That is not the point at all. The new restrictions, the bill proposes new offences of doing things like climbing war memorials, possessing pyrotechnics at protests, and concealing identity. So no more Antifa. They're done with that. And it also seeks to allow police to place conditions on protests that have a cumulative impact of disruption, which actually replaces the previous 2023 legislation that was quashed by judicial review in 2025. The Public Order Act 2023 amendments. In November 2025, the government laid a statutory instrument to expand the list of key national infrastructure under the 2023 Act. And this is where it starts to get horrible. I mean, it's all horrible, but this is where it starts to get really problematic, and you start to see what it's all about. One of the things that they're doing is a vote is scheduled for January the 14th. So that's this Wednesday, to include the life sciences sector as key infrastructure. So if that's passed, what that actually means is interference with sites like medical research centers or universities involved in animal testing could result in up to 12 months imprisonment. This is exactly why I do hope that John is able to join us from MRB. And he is outside the UK's sort of biggest Beagle breeding facility in Cambridge. He's been protesting there for a very long time now. It is actually one of the longest protests in the world. And what they do is they breed beagles on an industrial scale, and then they sell them off to be experimented on. It's really heinous stuff. Well, this new update would get rid of the protesters outside MBR Acres. And we all know that this is always, isn't it? This is always the government working hand in hand with big business, because for the most part, they're compromised. But it's also about big agendas as well. There is actually existing public order framework, as I say, the Public Order Act, the Public Order Acts of 1986 and 2023. And as of November 2025, new laws specifically restrict protests outside the homes of elected officials to ensure their privacy and safety. I saw that coming for a very long time. When we used to do regular doorstepping of politicians, and once facing off with David Cameron's armed guards as one example. And I remember at the time saying to my team, members of my team, they'll outlaw this one day because they can't have us getting too close to their officials. And lo and behold, and should be called death scientists, shouldn't it? Yep, this is newspeak, indeed. We've got to be suspicious of everything that they do, says Nikki. Indeed, we cannot trust our oppressors, not at all. And this is interesting. This week, the assisted dying bill returns to the Lords. It reconvenes on Friday to continue the line-by-line scrutiny of terminally ill adults end-of-life bill, but we call it assisted suicide around here. But I would doubt very much if they're going to get this through and into law. So this is Lord Faulkner of Thornton, very good mate of Tony Blair, used to be his flatmate at one stage. He was, I think, the Justice Secretary. If not the Justice Secretary, it was in a role as of Justice in Parliament. And he's sponsoring the legislation. And he's now claimed it's set to fail through lack of time. Well, there are now 1,000 amendments tabled. Now, the thing is they need approval by spring in order to be able to get this through and then take it through for royal assent and then to be passed into law. Well, that's in highly questionable whether that's going to happen now. And so what they've done is he has tabled a motion to request further time for the Lords to complete its deliberations. But this is not a popular bill. England is not ready for something like this. That much I can tell you. And I do understand that there are some viewers who think that there are pros and cons attached to this. And of course there are. But the real problem is I cannot trust any of these people to take our lives into their hands. We already saw what they did with C-19. They cannot be trusted. So, of course, you have assisted dying campaigner Dame Esther Ranson. She's repeatedly urged members of the Lords not to block the landmark legislation. She's warned that scrutiny must not slip into sabotage. I mean, again, Esther has been banging this drum now for about a year and a half. She's come out with really emotive stuff. I had to have an early Christmas because I didn't think I'd survive to Christmas. Well, I think she's still alive. Esther Ranson is exactly the point about assisted dying. And that is just because people might feel in that moment in time that they don't want to be here anymore, it doesn't mean that it's actually the reality. That's the reality. Back to Liverpool Pathway. Yes, absolutely, miss with a hiss. John is in it for principle, but not with our current crop of politicians in Parliament. Maybe with a more honest world. I cannot see a more honest world, but I take your point, John. I do. Right. What else do I want to talk about? What the hell is happening in Iran? What are your thoughts about Iran? Okay. I think that it's obviously very interesting. So what you have are two very distinct sides, don't you? You have this whole idea that it is about liberation, about overthrowing the regime. But actually, we also know that Zionists are all over this. Donald Trump is all over this, just as he was Venezuela last week. And maybe the Iranians do want regime change, but so does Netanyahu and Donald Trump. Hundreds of bodies dead in the street, body bags piling up, absolutely awful, awful stuff. And, you know, the thing is, I think it must be very hard for MAGA people because they were sold this idea that Donald Trump was going to be fighting the deep state globalists, to be benefiting ordinary working Americans. And the fact is, he's advancing every neocon agenda humanly possible. And it's, you know, it's about global domination. It is about control. And do you think, oh, that's something else. Who's defo complicit? What did I miss there? All looks like a globalist agenda, says Miss with a hiss. Well, it is fairly horrendous stuff, isn't it? I mean, when you see it, and it's so confusing because you cannot trust mainstream media to tell us anything. So what do we kind of know? Well, we know that protests have spread to about 180 to 119 cities across all 31 provinces. There's major hubs like Tehran, Tabriz. They're witnessing nightly clashes where demonstrators have blocked roads, set fire to police vehicles and government buildings. I think the most crucial thing that is really, I think really important that's taking place is this whole internet blackout. And so in the midst of all of this, the media blackout sort of began on January the 8th. So that was last week. We were told, implemented by the Iranian government to suppress a major wave of these protests. Both international and domestic telephone lines, including landlines and mobile services, have been disrupted. They've been blocked. There's been a media suppression. The government has targeted independent journalists with threats of imprisonment, while state-run media continues to broadcast official propaganda. And the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting and the Tasnim news agency, which is linked to the Revolutionary Guards, remain operational to broadcast the government's perspective. And I mean, it's obviously there's an economic collapse which is taking place. Their currency hit a record low of 1.42 million to the US dollar in late December 2025. And there is obviously a resource depletion. That's what we're told, that there is a severe energy crisis that's taking place, that they are now a weakened regional status. And that followed this sort of 12-day war that took place in June 2025. Free Iran, free UK, says Alien Big, Alien Big Cat. And obviously you have people like Donald Trump issuing direct warnings to Tehran, stating the US is locked and loaded. He just reminds me of a cowboy from old times. I just saw him on Air Force One and he was talking to the journalist. He doesn't like women. He does not like women, and he doesn't like powerful women. He was so rude, calling them idiots and stupid and just horrible individual. Horrible Iran can free themselves. Stop meddling in other countries, says Lyra. I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's all due to the sanctions put on them, said Hope, Love and Peace. So, yes, so obviously you have Donald Trump. He's doing his whole big thing. And Elon Musk is muscling in, of course, offering Starlink in light of the media blackout. I can't stand seeing people like J.K. Rowling going on about it. She's like so many who claim to care about women and children, but she only cares about specific women and children. Where were these people when it came to Palestine? Nowhere to be seen. Nowhere to be seen. And we know, obviously, that this is something very much that Israel wants. And people like J.K. Rowling and kind of faux, fake feminists like her, selective feminists, they are only interested when there's an agenda involved. Sonia, you were way off the mark with DJT, says Scout Finch. Well, the thing is, we like all different opinions around here. That's the important thing. So you're entitled to say that. Iran's main export is terrorism, says Sean. I see. And Lyra said Potter's books were a Tavistock creation pushing witchcraft. I've heard that before. A few times, actually. Interesting point. Yes, Scout Finch, absolutely. It's really important that your voice is heard as well as mine. And I endeavour to do that as much as possible. I have no problem whatsoever with dissent. None whatsoever. Oh, is that right, Captain Flint? Is that right? And obviously, so what Captain Flint is telling me is that our so-called patriots, they're backing Iran and the Iran protests. So obviously, it's about unstabilizing the country. I take your point. Whenever you see any of these fake patriots sort of rising up, right? And you know what it's about. You know that this is oftentimes, because obviously a lot of the fake patriots are Zionists. So obviously we know that. We know that. Isn't even not beautiful, but talented too, says Francis. Okay, thank you. Indigo says, Sonia, why do you never criticize anyone on the left or say anything positive about the right? Puts me off. Indigo Disco, you obviously are not around here long enough, actually, because I'm first of all politically homeless. I was so aggrieved by Labour and their various agendas that I was a former lefty. I was born and raised on the left, but I'm certainly not now. So that's not accurate, what you're saying. Not accurate at all. So moving on, but we shall see how this develops, shouldn't we? On this day in history, by the way, a bit of our history. The first supermarket in the UK opened on the 12th of January, 1948. It was a co-op. And while I don't have an actual image of that particular co-op, I do have one of the earliest co-ops that opened. And the idea that this was finally where shoppers could serve themselves effectively. Well, now it's obviously gone completely too far, because not only can we serve ourselves, but we can cash up ourselves, we can bag our groceries ourselves, and all of those things. Stephen is politically homeless too. Mel said politics isn't going to get us out of this mess. Absolutely. Martin said Iran is an effort for regime change. The unrest is stoked and fueled by external sources, one suspects. I suspect you may be right. So yes, that was our first sort of recognized supermarket on January 12th, 1948. It was in Manor Park, East London. East London. Bring back green shields. Lisa, you are now talking. Remember that? Remember that? We used to have green shield stamp books. And if I remember correctly, we could then cash them in for gifts, couldn't we? Yeah, wonderful. Elon Musk's solution to addressing the fact that his platform is promoting child abuse, by the way, is not to shut down the facility, but now to make it available only to those who pay for the subscription service, for the premium service. That's right. In Elon Musk's world, you can be a filthy perv who wants to undress women and children just so long as you have the money for it. Sounds a bit Epstein-esque, doesn't it? And so this was a message that was sent out to X users. And as I've said to you, we're not currently streaming on X. I've done far too much about the sexualization and abuse of children to support X. I hate it on there anyway, as people now know. I'm hardly ever on there. I have over like 107,000 subs, but I am so shadow banned, it's really quite untrue. And if you want a premium service, it costs between £3.50 to £36.17 per month to become a premium user of X. But not to worry, at least then you can have the tool to undress children and women. Bonus, according to these people. Problem is, he's attracted so many really awful people to the platform with this mindset of loathing women and children, actually. So much misogyny. It's really quite shocking. But Ofcom are investigating him. And Keir Starmer has come back saying, you know, just offering for it to be a subscription-only service isn't enough. But really, I think Elon Musk and Keir Starmer are really batting for the same team. Both of them are part of big technocracy. Both of them are informed and aligned with companies like Palantir as one example. And I noted that one user, because it's a notification tool that is being used on people, which is obviously outrageous for anyone, whoever they use it on, even if they use it on males. And Elon Musk used it on Keir Starmer. And but I noted that one user had decided to test this whole theory that all AI is the same. And so her name is Kate Conger, and she tested Grok versus Chat GPT and how they compare when it comes to generating deep fake images. And it turned out, shocker, that when she asked Chat GPT to do things like nudification, like to do deep fake bikini pictures of herself, Chat GPT refused all the way down the line, all of her requests. Grok didn't refuse one, because Grok has been created in part by incels. Men who are on the internet 24/7, and they have a very odd relationship with women, and the misogyny just screams at you from every angle. But yeah, Elon Musk Grok was happy to do everything because they have programmed it not to refuse. They literally could have at the start programmed it not to have a nudification tool, but they chose not to. Simpler times indeed, says the Blue Nomad. The Dark Prince has no sympathy with Epstein victims, says Kenneth. If it becomes subscription only, I'll be gone. I don't pay for my blue tick. They took away my original blue tick. I refused to pay to have a blue tick back, and then they gave me one back. I don't want it. I've actually contacted them saying I don't want your blue tick. So we shall see. And as many people have said to me, it would appear now that X is absolutely flooded with security state bots. And they are doing everything they can to convince us that what we actually need is to be more harshly policed and controlled than ever before. And there was people thinking that Elon paid 44 billion to give us free speech. Oh, how I laugh. Don't get me wrong. There are certain topics that he did give free speech back to. And one of them is a subject that I'm going to be just discussing shortly, which is the whole issue of transgenderism, because Twitter won. You could not discuss that issue. Many people were booted off for that, which was really appalling. But we all know that obviously Trump, very upset that his son is claiming to be a girl, and so has real issues with the whole transgenderism issue. Free speech. Paul's laughing. Musk, free speech absolutist. Woohoo. Yes, indeed. Anyway, we shall see what happens. But what really concerns me is that they already have the Online Safety Act. The whole point about the Online Safety Act, they sold it to us on this idea that it would protect children online. Well, clearly not. So clearly now they've had a look at it. They've realized that testing against various laws, people have been punished, by the way, and penalized for not complying with the Online Safety Act. Some platforms, there were some American platforms which shut down completely over here. And then you have people jumping up and down saying, Starmer can't ban X, we can't have him banning X, and all of that kind of stuff. But actually, no, what they want us to do, and it's so controlled, it's such propaganda. You see, where do you, if you have Elon Musk, apparent free speech absolutist, which we know he isn't, absolutely not, and then you have Keir Starmer, who is to all intents and purposes someone who has been actively working to shut down our free speech since he came into power in 2024. And so what they will do in the end is they'll find a compromise. They'll find a compromise, and the compromise is you are the data. Everybody will be expected to reveal their full identity online, which is really problematic. I've been around activists for a very long time, and some activists are actually extremely vulnerable and they cannot afford to put their full identity online. But that's not where this is going. This is going to a place. You said a son of Trump is trans. No, did I, London lady? I meant Elon Musk. If I said Trump, forgive me, I meant Elon Musk. Thank you for correcting me. I only use Instagram to get some funny material for my show, says Health Freedom UK. I mean, they're all pretty much the same, aren't they? Aren't they all pretty much the same? But yes, so what they'll do is they will meet in the middle eventually. And by the way, it is absolutely possible for a country to block Grok without banning Twitter or X. Indonesia have done it, right? So what excuse are they going to have? No, they want your data and they want your full identity. And that is the reality. No, son of Musk is trans. Sonia missaid, said Lyra. Yes, I meant Musk. Sorry. But there are many countries, by the way, that have banned X, which includes Iran, which includes North Korea, which includes Venezuela. So we shall see. But also we have people who, like Rupert Lowe, who are urging Elon Musk, JD Vance and Trump to essentially storm our country. So let me just get that right. Brexit, wasn't that about getting our sovereignty back? And then you have people like Rupert Lowe online saying, come in. You know, we are, whatever you think about the UK, we're still supposed to be a democratic country. And inviting foreign powers to come in and take over is really problematic. Really problematic. Anyway, and I think I've got a couple more minutes before I bring in my first guest. Very briefly, talk about Peter Mandelson. The whole Peter Mandelson thing has reared its head again. Obviously, Peter Mandelson was the UK's ambassador to the US, and he was sacked last year because of his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Mandelson said that he distanced himself. Epstein was an evil monster. Well, Mandelson gave his first TV interview since being fired from his diplomatic role, and he gave it to, well, establishment hack Laura Kunsberg on her BBC Sunday show. He was asked if he wanted to apologize to Epstein's victims. And you have to remember that this man was not considered the master of spin for nothing. And so he didn't actually want to apologize. What he said was, I want to apologize to those women for a system that refused to hear their voices and did not give them the protection they were entitled to expect, which I think is really egregious. He went on to say the same thing that he said before, and that is, I didn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein's goings on with young people because being gay, I think they didn't want to include me in it. Well, I don't know about any of that. Obviously, Epstein pleaded guilty in 2008 to soliciting prostitution and soliciting a minor. And emails that were published last year showed that Lord Peter Mandelson sent supportive messages to Epstein as he faced jail for sex crimes. So it's all very mealy-mouthed, isn't it? Remember, it was Keir Starmer who handpicked Lord Mandelson as US ambassador before going on to sack him. I suspect that the reason Mandelson was picked because both Donald Trump and Lord Mandelson had very good reason to ensure that the Epstein files were never released, talking of which they have actually missed a recent deadline. That's what they've done to do with the Epstein files. But hey, Donald Trump is very, very busy. Very, very busy indeed. Right. I want to bring in my first guest. She's here. Let's bring her in. Here she is, Kelly Oliver Dougal. Good morning to you, Kelly. How are you?
Morning, Sonia. I'm really good, thanks.
Lovely to have you with us. You are a counsellor. You specialise in working with trans widows. And honestly, like, even to say that as a statement, 10 years ago, people would not, well, even less. 5 years ago, 3 years ago, people wouldn't have had a clue what the heck it is that you do. So tell us a little bit about it. What is a trans widow for those who don't know?
Yeah, so a trans widow is a woman whose husband or long-term partner has transitioned and says he's a woman. Often these women have been very abused. There's a lot of cases. Excuse me. In a lot of cases, there's a lot of coercive control, domestic abuse, And so these women have suffered not only that abuse, but then when they try and get help from a counsellor, the counsellors affirm them, the man.
It's horrible stuff. I sometimes try and imagine myself being in their position, that you've been with your male partner forever and a day, because a lot of these males are transitioning at middle age, right? So they've often been with these partners for decades, haven't they? And their partners have seen, and they've often taken their partner's underwear and stuff like that and dressed up in their clothes and all that kind of stuff. But in your experience, how accepting are these partners really, as a general?
Of the woman?
Yeah, of the man claiming he's a woman, because you obviously what you have are some of these so-called, well, not so-called, some of these trans widows, and they come online and they're like, I totally support my partner and everything, but I just wonder how true that really is, and how does that really bear out in your experience?
So often they're coerced into going along with it, because if they don't, then they're called a bigot, or it is coercive control, and they're kind of gaslighted and told that their experience isn't true.
In your experience, how many women stay with these men who then claim to be women?
It often takes a long time for them to leave, because this behavior tends to happen once they have children, when they have a baby, or when they're like, little girl starts going through puberty. That's when they start coming out, and so by that time they've already got married, they're already financially interdependent on each other, so their lives are very entwined.
It makes me so sad, because we've been living through a period which is very trans affirmative, and that is, if somebody claims to have been born in the wrong body, or that they are the opposite sex, we are supposed to believe them, right? Well, I've not done that. I'm sure that you don't either. And I think that's really important for the women who are left behind, because they're in an environment which is telling them they are wrong. The actual biological women are wrong not to be supportive. How does that impact them?
Yeah, so I've actually had potential people coming to me, and then when I call their partner he, they're like, oh no, I can't work with you.
Ooh, so
but I can't lie.
No, but even though they recognize such a problem that they've come to you for help, they're still caught in the mindset that they must call their male partner she and a woman. What does that do to a person? As a counsellor, how does that impact a person over time?
Well, that trauma, they're not able to speak about it openly, so they're like walking on eggshells in their own homes. So they can't speak freely, they can't say how they feel, and everything's about the man. So they're centering the man and not themselves, and so it's really difficult for them to talk about it. But they're also going through a loss. It's almost like a bereavement, when someone dies. You've got a funeral and a ritual, and society comes together and helps you and supports you. But when someone is in that position, society doesn't recognize that that's a loss and a bereavement. So it's ambiguous loss. And I was talking to a trans widow that I know quite well, called Uta Hagen, who's in America. She's 30 years down the line, and when she first heard that term, she was like, oh, wow, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Right, because you are a widow, not you, obviously, but and Ut, she'd contacted me as well, was very pleased that you were coming on to talk, because this is a voice that we don't hear very often. How widespread is being a trans widow?
I think it's hidden from society. Women don't speak out, and they're not recognized anywhere really, except for in circles like, the women who are, well, they're known as TERFs. So in those sort of gender critical circles, then people tend to know what a trans widow is. Of course, there was that really good film, Behind the Looking Glass, which highlighted the trans widow's experience, and a lot of them are very similar.
What made you become involved in this in the first place? Because I'm guessing there might be some personal element attached to this that might interest you. No?
Yeah, kind of. So I first really, I mean, I've heard about bits and pieces, and then during the lockdowns, I was ordinary woman just getting on with my life, and then the lockdowns happened, and I was like, what on earth is this? And so I started digging, and I'm sure you've come across lots of people who did that during the lockdowns. I was like, what on earth is this? And I had a friend who I was going to the London protests with, and she was experiencing that with her child, like teenager. And then I didn't really get right into that because there's so many elements of what was going on during the lockdown that I was learning about. But then I went to a Let Women Speak with Kelly J. Keane and heard the voices of all these women and was like, oh my God, that's really, and realised how terrible it was and how much trans affected so many aspects of our lives that I didn't realise how serious it was. So I started going to lots of Let Women Speak events, and then I ended up in the general election standing for Party of Women last year. So yeah, so I was raising awareness through that. And then after I stood in the election, I wanted to keep on talking about it. So I started my podcast, and the most successful videos tended to be with trans widows. So I decided to specialise in that as well and pivot me counselling service.
What do you think is the biggest problem facing these trans widows?
Well, not being able to speak and not being able to be heard, and they often don't understand what's happening to them either. So they're sort of, coerced into going along with stuff. And some of the really strong ones are like, no, I'm absolutely not going to do that. But sometimes they are coerced into doing things they don't really want to do in the bedroom and things like that. And, so then they've got all that shame around that.
Oh, it's awful. So how does this actually impact the family when the dad suddenly decides that he's a woman?
So often the children are encouraged to go along with it as well and call dad mum. Often the man will mimic the woman as well. So that's a trauma for the woman as well, that this husband is now starting to look like them. That's really creepy. But then the children, and
like Norman Bates, isn't it? All over again. Oof. Yeah, it's creepy.
And then they go to school, and it's in the schools, and they're encouraged into this mindset, and it's like a brainwashing cult. And so, and then the children often then go down that path as well.
I think I recently did a report about sort of my journey and my experience. And I first sort of became aware about all of it in 2015 when I was asked to do a debate with Susie Green, obviously formerly of Mermaids. And we fell out horrendously, as you might imagine, as somebody who's been, opposing the sexualization and abuse of children. So I had a lot of issues with what Susie Green had done with her 16-year-old son, and Mermaids as well. But I have seen a change. Now, obviously, a lot of this is hard fought. There's almost a constant stream of court cases, isn't there? Yeah. Pushing back, trying to regain our rights. As an overview, do you see a change for the better?
Yeah, definitely since the election. Now, when I first started talking online about trans, I was targeted. So I was quiet for quite a while until I stood in the election. So when I stood in the election, I put my name out there and I was like bracing myself. But I think even from then to now, there's been a big shift, and it's much more acceptable to talk about these issues. And the trans activists are starting to get very confused as well when they're not the only person saying what, there's not just one person saying, no, that's not right. That's wrong. You can't be born in the wrong body. In the past, nobody would jump in and back you up, but now they will.
Well, now, so that's interesting. Let me read you some of the comments, right? This one is very critical. Okay, but I think you're more than up for this. It's my son made content said, what the F has it got to do with us, what these adults do in their own home? If the woman doesn't like it, kick the bloke out, split up. How is this an issue for everyone else? Explain how it is an issue for everyone else, Kelly.
Do I say that to victims of domestic violence? Because that's what this is.
exactly that. And see,
I'll just leave. I mean, people do say that to women who are suffering from domestic abuse as well, but it is the same thing, just with dresses and lipstick.
And that's the problem, is it's been given this whole kind of sheen, hasn't it, of progress, this whole idea that we are somehow backwards or bigoted if we don't accept it.
But it's a child abuse element as well. You've got to think about, these men want to breastfeed their babies with chemically induced, is it milk? Because I don't think it is.
No, it's and I always, when I look at it, I mean, I know they always tell us it's not a fetish, but when I see a man trying to force a baby to suck his nipples, I know that we're dealing with a fetish, and it's in plain sight. And I find it astonishing, given the uproar that we had following what happened with Jimmy Savile, that we're allowing this to happen. We're allowing strange men to travel across the globe and buy babies, do all manner of things, right? Extraordinary, which is all kind of intersects with each other. Yes, it is. It absolutely is. Lisa said it's so sad for the woman. It's a bereavement. But the men who are trans think about themselves and expect the woman to be understanding. It's very self-centered, isn't it? And Cameron said, not easy for children growing up in a confused world. And I think, honestly, my son made content. I would agree with you if nobody else was impacted, right? If this was somebody who liked to do whatever they wanted in their own home, and they weren't trying to change rules, and they weren't trying to get in women's spaces, and they weren't coercing their wife, and they weren't trying to confuse their children, then I would say it's none of my business. But because all those things are at play, it is our business, isn't it? And that's the reality, Kelly.
Definitely. Yeah. And, the child abuse is just, you've got to think about those women who are being abused, but also the children. And if all of the systems that are there to protect women and children are going along with this, which they are, where does the woman go to get help?
And also, I think what's interesting, so your counselling is not about like correcting them, right?
No.
So, because that's what they've been subjected to, isn't it? They've been told to ignore the evidence of their own eyes, and they must go along with this for the sake of progress. It must be such a relief for some women to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just a relief to be able to speak and not be corrected, and to be able to talk freely and say whatever you want. And the women that I work with are at different stages, so some of them will still call their partner she, and I wouldn't correct that. It's about working with them at their own pace to sort of come out the other side and realize what's been happening and start to heal from that.
Do you, because, and again, I interviewed Ray Blanchard, and I've talked about autogynephiles, and there's we know so little, don't we? People just talk about trans women. I don't use that expression. If I'm going to use it at all, I'll say trans identified males, because I think that's more honest and I think it's more accurate. But autogynephiles, is that something that you talk about in practice?
Yeah, definitely. So an autogynephile is someone who gets a sexual kick out of seeing himself as a woman, feeling like he's, wearing women's clothes and all that, and for other people to affirm that as well. So yes, it's definitely comes up.
And what about the violence that we often hear about this? Because I've always been quite angry about the whole idea that both sides are toxic. Women are not toxic when they just want to retain their own rights, right? That doesn't make them toxic.
I haven't come across any woman who's threatened a man with violence. It's usually a man who does that.
And how widespread is that? Because I'd hate to tar everybody with the same brush, right? To say that every man, because I know transsexuals, but the difference is the transsexual males I know have never insisted I call them a woman. And so I think that's the dividing line for a lot of people, right? A lot of people were prepared to like just live and let live as long as it didn't impact my life, but it started to. But how widespread is the violence, do you think?
Like physical punching and that sort of thing? Probably. I mean, it's quite dangerous for women at protests and things like that, because you will get the activists there. I think in terms of the women in their own homes, it's probably more financial, emotional abuse rather than physical, but there will be, and sexual abuse as well, but the actual physical abuse is probably not as prevalent.
So a lot of it is psychological, right? A lot of it's
Yeah.
psychological. You don't support me. You can't love me if you don't go along with this.
Absolutely.
I would really struggle. I would not be able to be with a man who suddenly declared himself a woman. I know that for a fact. And if
Yeah,
that,
they use our empathy against us. You know, women are very empathetic, and we want to put other people first. That we're kind of nurturing in nature, and so a lot of women do go along with it, unfortunately.
this is an interesting comment, and I wonder how much this plays a role in it as well. This is from Asylum. Men are victims of domestic violence, physical, emotional, and psychological. Absolutely, they are. And we wouldn't say otherwise around here. How much do you think the role of trauma for these males plays a role in them declaring themselves as women?
It's hard to know because I don't work with those men. So, but yeah, I think it does come into it from what I can gather. Yeah.
But it has to play. I think it has to play a part because this is clearly not logical thinking. Do you think there are external factors? Some people talk about drugs, some people talk about water, some people talk about chemicals, all different elements.
Porn addiction. Porn.
How much does porn play
Absolutely a lot. I see it all the time. A woman will say, "Oh, you was watching porn a lot," and there's a certain type of porn as well that you might have heard of called sissy porn, and that is very hypnotic. And I've not watched it. It's not something I wanted to do research in, but from what I've heard, it's very hypnotic. It's repetitive, and there are people online who want to convert these men into women.
It's terrible stuff. How can we move forward on this? Do you suspect, as I do, that this will not be as big an issue moving forward because most of the steam has been taken out of it now?
Well, I thought it was going to, I thought it would have gone by now. I'm constantly surprised at how vociferous people are. It's holding their ground. So I think we are making progress, but because it's in every institution, I think it's going to take a lot more work before we're finished with this. It's prevalent, and I think it's going to be there for a while.
And one of the comments here, miss with a hiss, I think I know that's true. Gender dysphoria was part of psychology and was removed in order to unleash this insanity. And there was a whole issue where they took it from being part of the diagnostic manual because they didn't want it to be seen as a mental health issue, right? So what has it become?
Well, to me, it's a cult. It's just a cult, and it's brainwashing our young people, because if there's such a thing as a trans child, then it's acceptable for these men. Oh, I've always been like this. But actually, for those men, it's a porn addiction usually, and it's a fetish. But for the young people, it's a social contagion. But it is starting to come out of fashion now with the young people.
And the pushback, this could not have happened without the pushback. I don't think for a second, because it was just, I mean, all of our institutions and establishments were captured. Department of Education, the NHS, all captured. I fell. I cracked my head open, and the guy, a lovely guy who saw me, had his LGBTQ lanyard on, and I felt really uncomfortable because I was like, he's attending my cracked head, but has he seen what I've written online? And so I was worried about that, because I don't necessarily want my head in the hands of somebody who may think that I'm a bigot because I oppose this kind of stuff. But I've always aligned myself with gay rights. I protested with Stonewall. Yeah, go on, Kelly.
I think some of those people are just going along with it because it's their job and they don't want to stand out and make a fuss. They don't want to get into trouble at work. But obviously there are activists in hospitals and stuff as well. And, so you're quite outspoken. So I would suspect that you would find it easier to advocate for yourself. But some women aren't like that, and they won't make a fuss. And so there's men on their wards and they won't say anything. And obviously bad things happen on hospital wards, like rape, and then the hospitals say, oh no, there's only women on that ward. That didn't happen.
Right. And we know statistically now, in like shared spaces, mixed changing rooms, that's where the volume of abuse and sex attacks take place. And more women are actually standing up. But it is scary as a woman when you go into a toilet and a man comes in and expects to be subject to the same rights as you do inside that toilet. So moving forward, if any of our viewers encounter a trans widow, what would be the kind of appropriate way to kind of deal with this issue?
Well, often people will say things like, oh, well, you're just too vanilla, you just need to go along with it and stuff like that when they complain. But actually, that isn't helpful because it's not recognising the woman's point of view and experience. And they're all about lived experience. So, yeah, just about listening to her and acknowledging that she's in an abusive relationship. And signposting that to me.
Exactly that. Yes, Realist is pointing out, look up Judith Butler and John Money. Indeed, the origin of all of this. Kelly, thank you for joining us this morning. Is there anything you feel you would like to add that you haven't been able to yet?
No, I can't think of anything, but thank you so much for inviting me. It's been lovely.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. I know sometimes these things aren't easy, but you're doing a grand job out there because these women need somebody and they have you, which is wonderful.
Yes,
Everybody, this is Kelly Oliver Dougal, and it's lovely to have her with us today. Have a lovely week. Take good care of yourself, Kelly.
Thank you. Bye.
Lovely to have her with us. And, she's such a genuine soul because sometimes you get plunged into these things, right? You get thrust into these things. Thanks, Kelly, says Stephen. And sometimes don't even know why, but I think it's really, really difficult. Hey, something completely different, by the way. Did anybody, lots of thanks to you, Kelly, if you're still around. Did anybody see that cyber attack on a study which linked the C19 jabs and cancer? Did anybody see that? Mysterious cyber attack that took place. So what happened was that the peer-reviewed journal OncoTarget on January the 3rd, there was a piece of research which was authored by cancer researchers from Tufts University in Boston and Brown University in Rhode Island. And in this review, researchers had analyzed 69 previously published studies and case reports from around the world. They identified 333 instances in which cancer was newly diagnosed or rapidly worsened within a few weeks following the C19 jab. And the review covered studies from 2020 to 2025, included reports from 27 countries, including the US, Japan, China, Italy, Spain, South Korea. No single country dominated. So that was interesting. And then literally days after the publication, OncoTarget's website became inaccessible. It displayed a bad gateway error, and the journal attributed it to an ongoing cyber attack. The journal reported the incident to the FBI, noting disruptions to its online operations. And one of the paper's authors, Dr. Wafik El-Derry of Brown University, expressed concern that the attack disrupted access to the newly published research. He said censorship is alive and well in the US, and it has come into medicine in a big, awful way. And the FBI told news outlets that it neither confirms nor denies the existence of any specific investigation into a cyber attack on OncoTarget. Now, that is an extensive piece of research, and the cyber attack appeared originally to hit around December 2025 as the site began glitching and slowing down. But shortly after the paper was published at the beginning of January, that was when it went offline. And I think that's interesting. These are massive data sets they're drawing on, by the way. And the researchers noted that the studies reported various types of cancer, but emphasized that these findings do not establish a causal link between vaccines and cancer. They have to say that, okay? However, the findings varied by age, sex, vaccine type, and dose, with patients taking more doses, more boosters of the C19 jab, later experiencing higher rates of some cancers, such as gastric and pancreatic. So I think all of that is very interesting. Markson said, we've known all this for years without studies. Yes, indeed we have. And then when they get a study with a significant data set, then it's subject to a cyber attack. There is no limit to the scummery of the institutions. Brad says, depopulation agenda 2025 and 2030. There's that year again. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that very, very much. Did you notice the AI, by the way, I've complained about this quite a lot, and that is when you put anything into any of the main search engines like Google, and if you put in a question, it'll instantly now come back with an AI suggestion for you. Now, that's really problematic because those AI suggestions are official narratives. They are the information that they're gathering are from approved sites, websites on the internet. They're not going into the small corners of the internet where the real stuff is. Okay. So AI is bringing you all official narratives. You cannot trust it. It's full of mistakes anyway. But I see now that Google has removed some of its AI summaries because they're saying that people's health is being put at risk by some of the suggestions that are coming up with AI. I would suggest that what's probably happened is every now and again, it's picked up information that Big Pharma, the handlers at Google don't want out there. And it's same way as remember when Elon Musk was when his chat box Grok, before it was undressing children and women, it was also telling the world what a fantastic person Elon Musk was. And when people were asking critical questions of Elon Musk, it was suddenly taken offline. I suspect it's all the same thing. I've been addicted to TikTok for 2 months. It's like the Alex off clockwork orange experience, says Revensteed. Got you. What's this? My aunt was under 6-month health monitoring because of small cancer about decades past. She took jab and had turbo pancreatic cancer, dead in days. I am so sorry to hear that, Kira. So sorry to hear that. Reba said AI told me it couldn't create images of a spiritual nature because its algorithm blocks it. Whoa. Yes, Marilyn, it was the previous CEO of YouTube who banned C19 questions, had changed her view because I've noticed many of the silent accounts returning. And she died of cancer, didn't she? You're absolutely right. And it won't be depopulation. They need the loosh. What's loosh? Probably you will have nothing and be happy. So bidding is called biting in Denmark. Handy if you need to know whether a 2012 McGann has positive or negative locking. Excellent comment. Right. I'm about to bring in one of our old favorites. And I don't mean old in the pejorative way. Not at all. There can be other factors that have increased cancer. Yes, realist. You're absolutely right. And they don't want us to explore that either, do they? That's true. Someone press a button. In 2020, anything C19 or 2020 election was instantly flagged and removed from YouTube until 2022. And the problem is they still have their medical misinformation policy, which is why I've been so reluctant to bring on our next guest. Let's bring him in now. And it's not because dear Clive de Carle is pushing medical misinformation. It's just because Clive is coming from and I'm loath to say alternative, Clive, because that has been demonized in its own way, hasn't it? Good morning to you, Clive de Carle. How are you?
Good morning, Sonia. Good morning, everybody. Yes, it's a wonderful day. I've never been in this one before.
Never been in this day. Now who said that?
Maya Angelou.
I think that was one of her last tweets, and I've actually got it, and it's even got the spelling mistake in it, which was so lovely. Or I think she said the twice or something. Lovely to have you with us, Clive. How's the weather where you are? Is it treating you well?
Well, it's not awful. There's no wind, so it's quite nice.
You sent me an email last week. We haven't talked to you for a while. And one of the reasons being literally what I just talked about, this whole idea of medical misinformation on YouTube. So we still have to be careful, but it has loosened up somewhat. And we are open to having a broader conversation about health than we have done previously. My one and only strike came from I would literally report it on Andrew Bridgen, who was then an MP. He did a talk in the House of Commons and he talked about the jab, and I reported on that, and that was how I got my first strike at YouTube. Fairly egregious, isn't it, that you can't even report on an elected member of parliament talking about the jabs, that you would then get a strike? How has it impacted you, the censorship around the issue of health?
Well, absolutely. You know, I'm unusual in that the government took down my YouTube videos in 2014. That was when I was working with UK Column, and they were exposing government sort of pedophilia or whatever, and so they took me down. I'm still trying to get that site back. Then they took it down again in 2020 when I started talking about vitamin C being the way to stay healthy. So they took me down again. So I'm still trying to get those up.
Can I point this, right? This is your vitamin C, and Clive does not pay me. This, if I promote something, I promote it because I believe it genuinely works. And last week I was starting the cold thing again that everybody was getting, all the sniffs and everything, all coming in my throat. And I took emergency measures of this. Look at me, didn't get it. I didn't get it. And I also used your immuno supplements as well. Talk to me about your last year, Clive. One of the things that you said was you went to a friend's clinic in Mexico for 10 days. You thought that you were dying.
Yeah. At the beginning of the year, I realized that I was getting some symptoms of ill health. And those symptoms, when I looked at them, other people would have said that was cancer. So I realized that I was in trouble because people started saying to me I was losing weight. And I wanted to say, what were you saying? I was fat before, but then I looked in the mirror one day. I try to avoid the mirror most of the time. And I suddenly realized I was losing muscle and my sort of skin was sort of hanging off me. And I thought, bloody hell, what's going on? So luckily, I'm surrounded by organic farms and I can eat really, really well. So I didn't think it was that. Then I thought, well, okay, supplementation. Am I getting it wrong? But I'm reasonably good at that. So I thought, no, that's all right too. So there are only 3 stresses that cause illness. I mean, or put it the other way, illness is only caused by 3 stresses. One of them is physical stress. One of them is emotional stress, and the other is chemical stress. Those are the only reasons we get ill, right? So I realized it wasn't chemical stress, because I'm really careful to eat without chemicals, you know? So emotional stress, well, I'd had a lot of business issues. My business virtually collapsed because I teamed up with the wrong person. So there's a bit of that. But I thought, okay, well, I'm addressing that. I'm quite calm and can cope with these things. So what else is it? And I thought, well, physical stress. And the more I thought about it, the more there was no other option as to why I was wasting away. You know, literally, my body was cannibalizing itself. So I thought, okay, the nervous system, the spine, the neck, perhaps it's got something to do with that. So I went to a chiropractor, Dr. John Bergman, and so I had to go to Mexico. He's got a clinic in the States, near LA as well. And so the first thing that happened is we did live blood work, and I could see the pattern of the cells wasn't healthy. Then live blood work can tell you so much. It's incredible. And I've had it done before, so I could see there was a change. Then we did an X-ray. Now, normally I say to people, I don't like X-rays. They're a bit dangerous. However, in this case, I was super glad that I did it, because when I saw the X-ray, if you'd asked me, how's your spine? I would have said, perfect. You know, often people have said to me, oh, you stand so straight and stuff. Anyway, on the X-ray, it showed something completely different. My spine was all over the place. And Dr. Bergman said, well, look, I think that's a 40-year-old injury, you know, maybe from skiing or car accident or whatever. Anyway, so I went through a series of adjustments. Now, I thought it would be 10 days. That's all I'd packed for. But I stayed 2 months. And the reason was that it actually took 30 5-minute adjustments over about a 3-week period, when suddenly, like a light bulb, I felt better. And every 2 weeks we'd do another X-ray, and you could see the improvement and the improvement. And the great thing about his practice is it happens in the open. You don't get ushered into a little private room. everybody is treated in the waiting room in front of everybody. So you can hear what everybody's saying, what John is saying. It was enlightening. And so he's in Mexico for 2 days, then he goes back to the States. So I would drive back with him and spend 2 days at the clinic there and then 2 days in Mexico and so on. And in that time, we had like 2 to 3 hours of driving every couple of days. And so I recorded everything he said, which was basically, he says wonderful things and I go, wow. He says more wonderful things and I go, wow. It's just incredible. So I literally got a book out of it, of John's wisdom. And to give you an example, let's say somebody's ill and they don't know what's wrong. Well, let's say that you went to the zoo one day. We've probably all been to the zoo. And generally speaking, the keepers know exactly what food to give the animals, what temperature it should be, how much light they should have, and so on. Now, let's say suddenly you're in the zoo and the zebras and the giraffes are both ill. Loads of them are ill. What would the first thing you'd ask the zookeeper? Surely you'd ask them, what have you been feeding them? Right? They're not well, because in the wild, animals don't normally get any of the diseases that farmed animals get, or indeed humans get. So there's something about food. Now, when did a doctor ever say, could your arthritis be caused by a food that you're eating? Could you be poisoning yourself? And what I've seen over the years is that everybody pretty much is forced to eat poison, to bathe in poison. You know, we're surrounded by the stuff, and very few people, even if they can get organic food, possibly can't afford it. So we're in a bind where the medical profession says, oh, you're low on drugs. No, you're not. I mean, nobody's ever low on a drug. That's not how it works. And so, you know, as you know, Sonia, 42 years ago now, I took an antibiotic, which is a big mistake. And the next thing, I'm in hospital. I can't walk anymore, can't get dressed. And I become type 1 diabetic and a whole host of issues. And the doctor said, well, there's nothing we can do, but we can give you drugs which will help with the pain and so on. And again, I'd say to them, look, I'm not low on a drug, you know, that's not the issue. And after 3 weeks of reading books in hospital, I worked out what had gone wrong, what the antibiotic had done. It had upset my gut, you know, there were issues. And I checked myself out of hospital, got wheeled out in a wheelchair, and I haven't had any serious problems since, basically.
And obviously that's informs so much of why you do what you do. Em is talking about our toxic skies as well. Has to play a part, yes?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they're poisoning everything. I would contend that it's possible that the C19 that people got was not an infection, but was poisoning in the water. I think that's quite possible, or from the air.
That is, we have to be so careful in that. Can you imagine the YouTube censors going off like nobody's business right now? Please note that is Clive's position. Okay. But I take your point because we obviously, you know, I mean, when I was able to talk to you much more freely about this issue, you know, as well as I do, I had so many issues around C19. It was clear about a lot to do with coercive control, about bigger agendas, not just about sort of ushering and digital ID, but there was a lockstep that was taking place around the world. Did you hear me saying about the cyber attack that had happened with this huge study that has taken place? And they'd got this massive data set from all around the world and to do with the C19 jab and cancer, and then it was hit by this huge cyber attack. Because who stands to lose when people like you rise up, Clive?
Well, you know, let's say that you and I figured out the cure for diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is easy, that's a dietary issue, but type 1 is much more difficult. There's a huge industry selling insulin and testing devices and so on, and those are specialist doctors. Now, if we presented Pfizer or somebody with the cure, what would they do? Close down all the factories, tell their shareholders, sorry, we've made a massive loss this year. What are they going to do? You know, so they might offer you so much money or an offer, a threat that you can't refuse or something, and they shut natural products down. You know, loads of the products I used to sell are now illegal. It's crazy.
I think I saw on your website there are places you can't even send to anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah, Spain, a number of European countries, a Brexit revenge or something, won't let our products in.
I mean,
Crazy.
it's extraordinary. Somebody's asking me about some of your technology. Let me just have a look at this, see what this is. Health Freedom UK. Sonia, can you ask Clive if the violet ray machine helped his recovery?
Very difficult to tell. Very difficult to tell. I think what helped my recovery far more was using collagen, creatine, various things to build up muscles. I have a product on the website, which is a vegan amino acid blend, which is incredible for putting muscles back on. And I haven't been doing it. There's so many products, who knows which one to choose, but now I am. And now I look in the mirror, and I'd say I'm 95% back to what I used to look like 1 year before.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. You mentioned two words that have become something of a buzzword. I cannot now go on Instagram without Davina McCall or somebody else telling me about collagen and creatine. And obviously, I've known about these things for a very long time. Why are they suddenly very popular?
Well, it's because people aren't making bone broth anymore. If people were making bone broth, they'd get all the collagen they needed.
Bone broth, I couldn't have that, could I, as a vegetarian? What does it contain?
Well, I was a vegetarian for 25 years until one day when I changed my mind. And I've been eating meat ever since. And I know a lot of vegans, particularly, who had to give up being a vegan. They had to go back to meat again. And suddenly they got their strength back. There's one really famous guy, for like 20 years, he was the face on YouTube pushing raw veg. And after 9 months of having been really ill himself, he admitted on YouTube that actually he'd been eating meat all that time. And he was really sorry for the advice he'd given previously.
No. This is just awful. This is awful. Yes, go on.
But it happens everywhere. I mean, for instance, 20 years ago, there were a number of cancers that the doctors recognized. Then, about 15 years ago, I read this article saying that several of the colon and bowel cancers have been recategorized as benign tumors or something. And people have been having all these operations because they believed that the tests were 100%. And let me give you another example. I think it's 65% of men who have a PSA test that is in theory too high don't have cancer. But most people have a PSA test, which is ridiculously unreliable, believe, oh my God, it's a death sentence. And cancer is a word, not a sentence.
Right, exactly that. But Clive, it's very difficult when you're as aware of our health and what impacts our health as somebody like you is, right? You can also feel helpless and hopeless, because what can we do about things that are outside of our control, such as EMF, such as what is happening in our skies? It's very difficult. How can we protect ourselves?
Well, there are lots of ways. I mean, one of the least expensive supplements that exists is iodine. Now, I prefer the least expensive version, which is called DOUGALL's iodine. And if your thyroid and your breasts, in women, the most iodine is in the thyroid and the breasts, and it fires up. It is the powerhouse of the hormonal system, basically. So if you've got enough iodine in the thyroid, radioactive iodine, which is in the air, has got no place to go, because your iodine receptors are full with the real stuff.
So it repels it.
Well, it's got no place to go. All the slots are filled, so it just floats on by. So, and this is the same in so many ways. If you've got the right raw materials, minerals, vitamins, amino acids, essential fats, to build your body as it should be, our bodies self-repair. We are self-repairing mechanisms. None of us are on a drug. None of us necessarily need surgery, except in the most absolute emergency situations. Very few people benefit from radiation, but everybody benefits from nutrition, and it's easy. Sunshine, well, vitamin D, if you can't get sunshine in winter. I used to get colds. Every year. Then I started taking vitamin D. That was the only change I made. That was about 20 years ago. I've had one sniffle for one morning once, and I did what you did. I mega dosed with a bit of vitamin C and took some vitamin D, and it ended. It's not difficult to understand how to keep yourself healthy. It really is easy. Let me give you one example as to why everybody pretty much is low on iodine. Now, a few years ago, the video's still up, I think. I got 3 glasses of tap water and with chlorine in. And I got some chlorine indicator drops. You can buy them on eBay for 10 quid. They show you how much chlorine you've got in your swimming pool. So I put a few drops in and it goes bright green, showing chlorine. The next one, I put my fingers in for 5 seconds, put the drops in, doesn't go green. Next one, I got a slice of raw potato, put it in the water for 3 seconds, pulled it out. All the chlorine had gone. The indicator showed no chlorine. Where had it gone? Into my fingers and into the potato. So each time you have a shower or a bath or drink water or cook in tap water with chlorine in it, it's going into your body. Your pores open up when you're in a hot bath or something, and in everything goes, the soap, the shampoo, whatever. But the problem is with chlorine is it knocks out iodine. So everybody's low on iodine because most of them are bathing or ingesting chlorine one way or another. So what can you do about that? Well, if you run a bath, you can put a teaspoonful or 2 of vitamin C powder, very inexpensive, into the bath before you run it. And you'll notice if you normally smell chlorine in your bathroom, you won't, because it neutralizes it. If you're in fluoridated water areas, buy some borax, genuine borax, put a teaspoonful of that in the bath, and it will neutralize the fluoride. So if you're low on iodine, what happens? Well, your children have a low IQ. People have thyroid issues, and the doctor wants to give them a drug for that. You can get thyroid cancer. The doctors are confused. They say things like, well, look, if you've got a high thyroid, you don't need iodine. This is wrong. They're not taught iodine or minerals. They do 4 half days in a year or something like that on nutrition. They're not taught anything valuable. But if you want to know what the answers are, what happened in 2014 when YouTube took me off the first time, I started a club called secrethealthclub.com. And all the information that they don't want you to know is safe behind a club. Now, initially, the club membership was free. Then I had to take on staff, so I had to make a charge. But even now, it's free if you need it to be. So the cost per year is like 80 quid or something. But if you're on a low budget, email me, Clive at clivedecarle.com, and say how much you can afford. You can have it for that. If you can't afford anything, then you have it for free. This information, I've been gathering it now for 11 years. It's from A to Z. So if you've got this problem or that problem, you can look it up, and there are people who are way more knowledgeable about individual areas of health saying what you can do. And it's super simple. There's another section just on supplements. What are they? What do they do? Because we can't put any information on our shop website. We're not allowed to.
It's terrible. First of all, I love that you're doing that, because I hate the idea that health is only available to the wealthy, right? Or people can afford it. So I love that. Thank you for that. And I will put your email address in the description at the end of the stream as well, and should people wish to contact you. Let me ask you this. No Baloney Mahoney says, what does Clive think about colonoscopy?
I wouldn't go for that. When I thought I had cancer, that was it, colon cancer. And what they suggest is they stick a camera up your ass, and people can get ripped. It's not the safest procedure, a lot of bends and things to go around. And so, you see, I'm not scared of cancer. When I talk about cancer, I spell it with a K for legal reasons. I can't write that word on my website. Cures and cancer are against the law. 2 years in prison if you claim you can cure cancer and you're not a doctor. So
absolutely, according to the Cancer Act, right?
Exactly, 1939, I think. I read it, funnily enough, and I rang up my legal advisor. I said, do you know that the Cancer Act doesn't cover Northern Ireland? We could open a cancer clinic, national cancer clinic in Northern Ireland. It's not against the law there. And his reply was, how much do you like living?
And we've talked about this before, because I've always been concerned to a degree about you and about, because I remember you being demonized in mainstream media press, because obviously these people are terribly compromised. If they're not on the board of big pharmaceuticals, then they're mates with people who are. And so they're all in it together. It's one big club. And I remember them coming after you as well. But I've always had some concerns to a degree about your safety, because you just carried on regardless, which is wonderful, which I love. And even though you've been dealing with your own health issues, but do you ever have concerns about your safety? Because these people don't play.
I don't back off, but I did once when I was working with GC Math and David Noakes and his GC Math product. I was pretty much the first person to publicize it, and I interviewed the inventor. I had loads of interviews. And then I started getting calls from everybody, the inventor, saying, take your videos down immediately because we're all getting death threats. And I thought, okay, well, they're getting death threats. So I took everything down, of course, and people were getting killed. Dr. Bradstreet is the primary example, the first one who got killed over it because he was relating it to autism, and they were having massive success. There are other ways now that are way more successful. If somebody's interested in reversing or helping somebody with autism, the Secret Health Club has got later information because GC Math isn't available. Anyway, I thought, well, they're the big boys, they're going to get the flag. Anyway, then I started getting death threats, people over the phone, and so that was the only time I backed off. But at that point, I was doing a tour in Ireland, Southern Ireland, and there was a woman called Fiona O'Leary and a few others which were protesting outside. Every time I do a talk, they'd ring up the Garda, the police, and say, this man is dangerous. But they knew who she was, so they just laughed it off. They didn't care. Then she'd ring the hotels and try and get me cancelled. And a lot of hotels did cancel me. Then there was one that didn't cancel me. So they did there were 7 people with placards outside, and then they did a bomb threat to clear the building.
Good God. So
I backed off that. I had to back off.
So how long have you actually been in this? Decades now, right? Have you? Yeah, it's a long time. Have you noticed a change, though? Is society becoming more open-minded to anything that isn't allopathic? It is, right?
Oh, definitely. And you can tell that because of the press. Probably everybody's read in the press things like vitamin C is synthetic and dangerous. Vitamin D could damage your health. And so whenever they have a hit piece, the Daily Express and the Mail occasionally have ones, vitamins don't work or something like that. Then you're getting somewhere because it's so cheap. Drugs are horribly expensive, but vitamins and minerals, relatively speaking, are very inexpensive. I stopped getting colds for a cost of £10 a year. That was all it took, because vitamin D is so cheap, so inexpensive. That was all it took. Other people might need to take vitamin C. They might need to take zinc. There are a few things that people with colds generally are lacking. But we're meant to be strong. I don't believe a cold is an infection anyway. I believe it's a vibrational frequency, which one person is having a big detox. Suddenly their temperature is way up high. They're burning off all the bad bacteria. Snot's pouring out like mad. They feel they've just got to rest. And the body's gone into rest and repair mode, parasympathetic. Whereas most people are running on sympathetic dominant. They're in fight or flight all day long, and their bodies can't repair. But when it gets desperate, the body might say, well, fuck this. I'm going to give you a cold whether you want one or not, and get all that toxins out. Because I eat really well, I'm not eating as many toxins as most people are, and I take enough vitamin C and vitamin D to keep my levels up. I think that's why I haven't really had a cold, in years. And everybody's capable of that. The problem is, can you afford it?
Now, that's what I was going to say. Is everybody able to have that good a diet? Because I mean, first of all, I don't buy into the idea that, because a lot of people, you know, buy ready meals and everything and all that kind of stuff, whereas obviously I can go to the market, I can get lots of vegetables for pretty much the same price, but those vegetables can go for 4 meals, you know, 4 or 5 meals for the same price as some ready meals. But it is hard, isn't it? We're sort of priced out of good health to a certain degree, aren't we?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
How do we get around that then? If people
Well,
struggling to eat, how do we get around that?
okay. Well, my recommendations are, you know, I know you're not into meat, but for those who are into meat, often the very cheapest cuts are the best. You know, pork spare ribs, probably one of the cheapest cuts out. Belly of pork. You don't have to get the expensive stuff. I think chicken wings, for instance, are way more tasty than any other part. You know, but they take their fiddly, but they're so cheap, you know, incredibly cheap. With vegetables, what I've been doing for years is sprouting. You know, you get, let's say you like bean sprouts, for example, get a tiny amount of mung beans, which grow into bean sprouts, and you get them wet for a day. And I've made videos about it. It's dead easy to sprout stuff, just takes a few days. And suddenly a few seeds that cost you pennies have given you a big jar full of bean sprouts or whatever it is you want to sprout. You know, you can mix a dozen different sprouting seeds together. And unlike the garden centre where they're, you know, 20 for £5 or something, you can buy a whole kilo of sprouting seeds that are organic for very, very little money indeed. You know, a kilo of broccoli seeds can keep you going for months. And you've got fresh vegetables. You don't need sunlight. Sprouts, you obviously sprout underground initially. They don't need sunlight. You can do it in a cupboard, on a windowsill. It's so easy and cheap. And you can sprout any bean except for kidney beans. Kidney beans are poisonous if they're raw. But every other type of bean you might like, you can sprout them. And now suddenly you've got a living thing. I mean, let's take... if you like hummus or falafel or something, you can get dried chickpeas, soak them, they'll now quadruple in size, if not more, and you've taken something that's dormant, right? That seed has been taking in the sunlight and the nutrition the whole previous year, and now it's ready, it's powerful, it's ready to go. So the moment you sprout it, maybe the vitamin content or the mineral content might have gone up significantly, 50 times, because from dormant, it's now alive, it's living, it's, you know, vibrant, and so you can eat for pennies. I mean, yeah, you might find sprouts incredibly boring, but I have found you can cook them. You know, you can, let's say you want to cook chickpeas, well, you can sprout them first and then cook them, you know, and still make a nice falafel or hummus or whatever it is. There are a lot of ways to actually eat for fairly little money. Eating seasonally, obviously, which is what our ancestors had to do.
Exactly. That, which is a major issue, isn't it? And also, I mean, when I made my film, The Business of Cancer, if I remember correctly, it was like 1 in 20 of us were estimated to have cancer in the 1970s. And now it's 1 in 2. So clearly, our society is more sick than ever. With all of this intelligence and all of this knowledge, we are more sick than ever. And that is to do with, it's environmental. It's obviously what we put on, like you say, chemicals, what we eat, what we put in our body, what we put on our body, what is raining down on us, what we're surrounded by, even chemicals in things like carpets, right? It's all around us, isn't it? That's the problem.
It is, but we can recover from virtually everything. I mean, we're a pretty much dominant species on this planet. We are very resilient, super resilient.
Right.
And you see, I don't see cancer as a death sentence. You know, you get it, you can recover. You know, you can rebuild the cells of your body, and I've seen people recover. You know, for decades. It's not hidden. Some people, every doctor has seen what they'd call spontaneous remission. You know, they've all seen it, and once you understand that you are in control. And that just because you've been poisoned doesn't mean you can't unpoison yourself. Vitamin C, great for unpoisoning. So many supplements that are available out there, MSM sulfur, magnesium, all sorts of super important products. And, you know, this is going to sound like a terrible advertising ploy, but I put together a box of the 10 most important supplements that I think would change most people's lives. And it's costs, I think, 170 quid. It's a box of 10 supplements. And although it's a 1 month rejuvenation pack, some of the bottles are large enough that they'll probably go on for a few months. But, you know, if you can afford that, and I appreciate it's a lot of money, try it for a month. There's a very good chance that you'll find aches and pains have gone away, that your brain fog has lifted, that your heart's not racing, you're not as anxious as you were, your muscle cramps have stopped, twitches, spasms, menstrual cramps. You know, suddenly, in a month, most people, I would say, are going to notice something. You know, if they're 100% healthy, they might notice nothing. But brain fog lifting is big. People with getting the symptoms of menopause, iodine alone can help that. But iodine, along with the mineral selenium, now you're talking. You know, if you've got cold hands and feet, or people shake your hand, or you're hot, you can balance. It's the thyroid that controls temperature. Thyroid controls the hormones, as we mentioned, particularly when it comes to menopause, which is why the Japanese don't have menopausal symptoms generally. So they get so much iodine in the sea fish and all the seaweed that they eat.
Is that they don't have menopause? Not
Well, hardly at all. It wasn't in the dictionary in Japan for years, because it was.
Obviously, these women are stopping menstruating, but what you're saying presumably is they don't have all the attendant issues that we experience in the Western world, right?
Well, you know, with menopause, a lot of women find the hormones are unbalanced, that they've got brain fog, they can't think straight, that their skin's maybe getting dry, maybe they're putting on weight. There are a number of things that thyroid, you just look up thyroid deficiency problems, and you'll see, you might recognize yourself. Iodine is so important, and you know, it's the number one thing in a way to study, along with magnesium, vitamin C and vitamin D, and selenium. All these things are in my rejuvenation kit. Now, if somebody says, "Oh, I can't afford that," but you're a couple or something, split it in two. Don't take half. Take all of it in 2 weeks rather than spread it out over 4.
Right.
And share it between 2 people. You know, because I say, so many people notice the difference, particularly with magnesium. That's where people really notice.
I did. Under your guidance, I was in terrible pain, even struggling to walk at one stage. And you told me to take an emergency dose, and I did, and I followed that, and it did make a difference. I mean, I would say now that pain that I experience, I probably get it now maybe twice a year, but I've no plans to like have surgery or anything like that. And that's huge difference, because I was suffering on a daily basis. And what I've noticed is that I often get a pain in my hip now when the weather changes. Well, I would imagine that's fairly normal, isn't it?
Well, if it depends. If it's in the winter and you're not getting sunshine, then I would think, well, maybe you're running low on vitamin D, as pretty much everybody is in the winter.
Right.
It could be that you just need a bit more magnesium at certain times of the year, possibly.
Right.
But everything works together. You know, vitamin C makes magnesium work properly. Magnesium works vitamin C work properly. But the thing is, there are things like sugar, right? Now, most of us like sweet food from time to time, and carbohydrates like beer or bread will break down into sugar. But the issue is that for every molecule of sugar that you ingest, you need 50 molecules of magnesium to mop it up.
Wow.
And as most of us are eating more carbs and fruit and sugary stuff than would be natural for our ancestors, we're almost all low on magnesium. We're all stressed. The body responds to stress by burning your magnesium levels up. And then suddenly you get into a panic or something where you run out of magnesium. Your body could have coped with that. It's the difference between a challenge and a problem. You got enough magnesium, it's probably more of a challenge. You run out of magnesium, it's a bloody problem.
Some questions. Ange says, please ask Clive what is best for diverticulitis.
Okay. I would suggest probably bone broth or collagen might be an interesting place to start. Again, you're not going to want to hear this, but a few years ago, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I had this guy come to me and said IBS for, I think, 11 or 12 years, and you couldn't go out of the house for more than an hour without what they call disaster trousers happening. Anyway, he tried every diet that he could think of. He'd gone raw vegan, he'd tried everything, exclusion diets, and the very last thing, in absolute desperation, he went raw carnivore for a few days. 3 days, fixed it. And I've got a recording of him. I did a 2-hour interview with him, talking me through it. He said it was those damned vegetables.
Oh.
He stopped eating vegetables for a bit, and his bowel fixed itself. Right? For some reason, he was one of these unusual people that vegetables were upsetting his bowels in some way. So, you know, and this is true for almost any food. If you think you've got a problem with the food, if you can stop it entirely for a while,
right,
few days, few weeks, might even be a few months.
Right, to see if it is it.
Well, no, lots of people can go back to it again.
Right.
You know, people, you know, they put peanut oil in some of those candy things. So why nobody was allergic to gluten or peanuts when I was young that I ever heard of. I mean, anybody is. Could it be that, you know?
Yes,
so,
good point. Good point. Wake Up viewers are savvy enough to be able to understand exactly what you're saying there. So yes, excellent point. Good point. M says, what does Clive think about microdosing mushroom protocols?
100%, yeah. Absolutely.
Very straightforward. Is that information that people could pick up in the Secret Health Club?
Good point. I'm not sure. I don't know. I can't remember whether I'm very keen on mushrooms in a number of ways, but I can't remember whether there are any good videos about it. But, you know, microdosing anything. I've microdosed iboga. That's an interesting one.
Peter could listen to you all day, apparently, and which is lovely. I mean, the amount of people who've, you know, it's always the same old thing. Clive, you must get it all the time. I love his voice. Hear it so often, don't we? I've heard this before. Julie says, what a lovely man, Sonia. Please have him on again. Thank you. And I think as YouTube loosens up, I will be able to have Clive on more, because I really value Clive and have done for many years now. So it's lovely to be able to reconnect with you, Clive. Really it is. So tell me, what's one thing that we could do today to make a positive health change?
Well, when I was studying cancer survivors 20 odd years ago, I asked them, the ones that survived long term, right? What did you do right? And I was expecting them to say, oh, I took vitamin C or vitamin D or something. Anyway, almost all of them said the same thing. They said, I knew that suddenly I was winning because I became grateful to the problem, right? And so what they'd say to me is, oh, the cancer was horrible. I was suffering and it was terrible. And so much pressure from the relatives to start taking drugs. I didn't want to do that or whatever. And then they suddenly got to the point where they were grateful that it happened. This is what happened with me 40 years ago. You know, I was grateful to the arthritis because I got a career. I woke up, I learned loads of stuff. It became really useful. The worst possible thing often becomes the best thing after a while. So the survivors of cancer would often say, well, I became grateful. I changed my life because I realized everything happens for a reason. I was doing something wrong. They changed, they became grateful, it went away. Then number 2 was forgiveness, forgiving yourself. Because people think, oh, I made these terrible mistakes in my life. No, you didn't. Right. You never made a mistake.
Right.
You always did what you thought was the best thing to do at the time.
Right.
How stupid that was. We beat ourselves up for mistakes we never actually made. I mean, the price for the mistake is the learning.
Absolutely, you know? It is. Sometimes best way to learn. I'm definitely a school of hard knocks learner, and I don't think there's a problem with that at all. Clive, we could have you on all day. Unfortunately, time doesn't allow us to do that. Reba said, "Thank you, Clive. So interesting indeed. You'll be back with us again soon, won't you, Clive? Now we've reconnected, right?
I hope so. There's so much to talk about. Ridiculous amounts."
Julie says, cancer survivor here. Agree, Clive. Thank you. And it's interesting. Julie does it with a K as well. Very, very alert and on top of it all. It's never too late to learn, says Vanessa. Indeed, everybody. This is Clive de Carle. Take good care of yourself, Clive. Lovely to see you again. And lovely
Feel
to
free
hear
to bleep out the words that were naughty.
it. Take good care of yourself.
Thanks,
Lots of love
Sonia.
to you. Lovely to have you. Thank you, Clive. Have a great week, says M. Great, you have Clive back. I will, I promise. Take care of yourself. Clive de Carle, everybody. Lovely guy. And the thing is, I'm not going to bleep out anything. What I'll do is I'll just take the monetization off of it. I have people who watch me for the slightest thing and then they report me to YouTube because they're arse wipes. Great stuff. Cheers, Clive. Top man. Thanks, Clive. Thank you, Clive. Thanks for all the info. Very welcome. Very welcome. Pray and thank you for Clive. Lovely words. Lovely, lovely, lovely words. Right. A question. Does what happened in France last week help or hinder Candace Owens? So on January the 5th, Paris Criminal Court convicted 10 individuals for the cyberbullying and harassment of French First Lady Brigitte Macron. And this was regarding false claims that she was born male. And it's very important to note they were not convicted necessarily of calling Brigitte Macron male, but of what was known as cyberbullying. France has very, very tough laws regarding cyberbullying. So obviously there's a separate US defamation lawsuit that the Macrons have issued to Candace Owens. Now, it's very interesting. Oh, I want to bring in an image there. It's very interesting because on the 9th, which I think was Friday, right, Candace Owens was due to submit to the court. Now, let me just find an image here. So, oh, it won't let me. Look at that. Let me just get something. Sorry about this, guys. I just want to bring it in because I always think it's best if I can illustrate, actually. Candace Owens was due to submit to court on the 9th. And what she was due to submit was her position on the defamation claim. Now, she's talked about it often. And that is they were attempting to get this lawsuit thrown out because the lawsuit is in Delaware. And it's very distinct, it has to be said, from the French cyberbullying case. Owens was not a party to the French case. So whether what will happen in France will impact America, I would suggest not at all, not even a small little bit. And the French convictions are viewed as a victory for the Macrons and a precursor to the US claim, but I don't see how they can be, because these are not people who have been sued in that. It was a criminal case and defamation is civil anyway, but these are not people who are being sued for calling her a man. No, so I don't see how it actually can impact Candace Owens. Now, Candace Owens has doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down constantly. And she said that she talked about how these convictions were based on France's cyberbullying laws rather than proof of gender. She continues to assert her claims, and she said a number of times that she would stake her entire professional reputation on the fact that she believes that Brigitte Macron is not only a man, but that these two are somewhat engaged in this really weird, incestuous relationship. But it always disturbs me that the bigger story is always, it's kind of missed for the whole idea that Brigitte is allegedly a man. And that is that obviously Brigitte met Emmanuel Macron when he was a schoolboy, right? And I think that's always been really, really problematic, and should be more of an issue. But obviously they get out of it, don't they? They say, oh, they met again when he was older and all of these things. Yeah, but what about any of the coercion that would have taken place when Emmanuel Macron was at school? Okay, so I think it's going to get interesting. But what is interesting is Candace was supposed to have filed by the 9th of January, right? Her dismissal. And court documents have not yet surfaced. Now, it could well be that they did file in time, but it's actually involves something to a degree of a manual process. And that is the court has to pick up these documents from the filing system, and until they're acknowledged, they don't become public. So it could well be that her team did file on time, just hasn't yet become public. Whether she will get a dismissal, I would be highly surprised, because the reason that they filed in Delaware is that's where her business interests are. Even though she's in Texas, I think her business interests are based in Delaware. So it's actually a legitimate reason to file there. But no, I don't think for a second what happened in France last week will impact Candace Owens. Not at all. I actually think That's so interesting. Somebody thinks that both Brigitte and Candice are both men. But Free Steamer says it's simple for them to prove she's not a man, but they won't do it. Well, they are saying, aren't they, that they will submit to various tests and evidence when it comes to the court. But how intrusive is it going to be? So I don't know. Let's see. Anyway, let's move on. I have a competition for you, beautiful people. And we've just been talking about good health. And this is the very lovely, the International Macrobiotic School run by Oliver Cowmeadow. And they have some goodies for us kids. They have some goodies. And they are offering 3, count them, 3 places to viewers on the upcoming online course, Holistic Nutritional Therapy, which starts on the 27th of January. I think I've already put a link in the description to it, but you can win one of those places. And all you have to do is the usual rules apply, and that is contact me by 6 p.m. tomorrow. That is Tuesday, the 13th of January, 6 p.m. GMT, to my email, Sonia Poulton at sky.com. Put competition in the subject, and the first 3 random viewers that I pick out will each receive entry to this course. I think it's going to be fabulous. The Christmas course was wonderful. And also, that we had some delay in some of our viewers receiving the Christmas course because I think it was going into their spam inboxes. So please, if you're ever applying for any of our competitions, please always check your spam inboxes, because quite a few people have not seen that they've been winners because it's gone into their spam inboxes. But not only is the International Macrobiotic School doing this for us, they also have an upcoming online open evening on the 16th of January. And this is really for anyone who's interested in knowing more about the school. And so if you're interested in those details, I will also put the open day link in the description below. And I think I one thing that I intended to make, which I still haven't made, and I must, because Lara, who's like, I think the school cook, her recipes are fabulous, so easy to follow. And I'm going to make a beef Wellington without the beef. I was intended to do it for Christmas. I didn't get around for it. Candice doesn't want dismissal, wants discovery in court. Well, Ray J, they are fighting for the case to be dismissed from the Delaware court. So I'm not sure how that works. Because, sometimes people say one thing out front and one thing another, right? Anyway, there you go. If you're interested, then please do sign up. Oh, my days. John Curtin, are you there? I think John Curtin from Camp Beagle has managed to join us. How brilliant, John. It's so good to see you. How are you, mate?
I'm good. Say hello to Pepe.
Oh, Pepe, hello, Poppet. Hello, darling. John, I'm so glad you're here because there's so much going on in government at the moment. And this week, they are really trying to get rid of people like you from MBR Acres. What can you tell us?
Let me wait there a minute because our alarm's gone off and a suspicious vehicle's just gone in. I'll tell you, I'll be with you in a sec.
No worries, John. An alarm and a suspicious...
Here we are, live and direct.
Look at that, live and direct from MBR Acres. This is in
What
Cambridge.
was it? You could have a knows what it is. Yeah, suspicious vehicle. Anyway, yeah, it's all happening. Right, what's happening is that about just before Christmas, one of our eagle-eyed campaigners happened to notice a really innocuous piece of government tweaking of a piece of government legislation. If she hadn't noticed it, there would already be a law passed in this country. The Labour Party have been so disgusting. They've got such a disgusting track record when it comes to, say, laboratory animals. Other parties don't make the promises that Labour do. The Tories never promised to do anything about animal experiments, and therefore, business as usual. The Labour, before they get in, they promise the earth, and they give you, not only do they give you nothing, they do the opposite. They're traitors. So there was this innocuous piece of government legislation that was going to tweak. It's called a statutory instrument. These things are used by the government to make the tiniest bits of change to laws. They were saying they're going to change the Public Order Act. At the minute, it's the Tories brought in this Public Order Act, which makes it illegal to interfere with motorways and power stations in terms of like, this is the essential national infrastructure of the UK. Let's not go into the power stations and motorways, you know, but what they want to do is introduce life sciences into that section.
Exactly that. Exactly.
If you look at the definition of what life sciences means, it's botany, zoology, but the animal testing industry, because they lie about everything they do, that's the term that they love to use. The laboratory up the road used to be called Huntingdon Life Sciences. Life sciences, in the way that they use it, means torturing animals. But we caught them. And because we caught them, they weren't allowed to go through on the nod. And then they had a committee meeting. We got loads of MPs to go to that committee meeting, and these government committees, they're set up just to say yes to whatever the government wants. And even though every single MP that stood up voted, said we can't allow this. This is going to criminalise protesting against animal testing. For God's sake, the Labour Party have promised to phase out animal testing. Instead, they want to get rid of protesting. But the MPs said no to it, and then in Parliament last week, what they wanted to do is they read it out. The original plan was to read this out at the very last minute of business, just before the Christmas break. But we were on to them, so it got read out last week. And because we'd mobilised, there was MPs there to say no. Otherwise, it would have been passed. And this Wednesday is going to be voted on. There won't be any debate on it, even though it's a really, really controversial issue. So we've caught them doing their dirty, filthy tricks where they were going to try and criminalise, and they were going to try and get rid of Camp Beagle. I still think it's going to happen. We're asking people now this Wednesday to defeat the government in a vote, which is a really difficult thing for like tiny little groups like ourselves. But I don't think we'll do it. I think they're going to use it, and they're going to use it as a draconian sledgehammer. But we'll try. We'll try.
And you always try, John. You're brilliant, absolutely amazing. And of course, some people who are just joining, they're like, you know, what is MRB Acres? Well, I've been to MRB Acres before, and it's this large facility where they breed beagles for experimentation. And yeah. John is outside there day in, day out, no matter what the season is. I think Camp Beagle is one of the world's longest live protests, isn't it?
It is. Well, we go in tradition. There was the Greenham Common Camp that lasted for 20 years. 20 years of opposition to American cruise missiles over here. But we're in that tradition, and we've been here for 4.5 years. We promised 4.5 years ago that we're not going to leave it until this place shuts down. It's a puppy factory run by an American company. They were kicked out of Italy, and they came to the UK because they say Italy was too restrictive. How shocking is that? People used to look to this country for progressive ideas, for for being a real global name in the terms of looking after animals. Now the animal testing industry is wanting to flock here because they're going to get protected by the UK government. Look at how these dogs are kept. They never see the sky. They live in their own piss and shit. They haven't even got a water bowl. They haven't even got a bed. And from here, they get tortured in 70-year-old toxicology tests that you won't find. There's not a single scientist, let alone a professor, that will defend what's happening in here. But yeah, as usual, government gets into bed with big business. And we're talking Pfizer, Monsanto, DuPont, Syngenta, the biggest companies in the world.
Exactly. Last week I did if you're going to have New Year's resolutions, the very least you could do is make sure not to buy products which are tested by animals. And they're very deceptive, John, because even companies that say we don't test except if the domain requires it. Well, a lot of these people go through mainland China that demands animal testing, and a lot of these companies. So it's really important. So I did a long list of all the companies that are still using animal testing, but it doesn't make any sense because
how do we boycott, say, insecticides and pesticides? Because when you go to the supermarket, your vegetables are covered in chemicals. And it's those chemicals that the dogs will get used for. So yeah, we should buy products that are not tested on animals. But that will only scratch the surface. What this place relies on is global multinational chemical corporations who have 70 years ago, they found a way to flood the market. We've got 500,000 chemicals on the market, and they say, don't worry, everyone. We've tested them on dogs and mice. If your children were sick, would you take them to a mouse specialist or a dog specialist?
Right.
Or imagine taking Pepe. Pepe's injured at the minute. She's healing. But I don't take Pepe to the GP surgery. I take Pepe to the dog specialist. But these chemical industries, in the age of stupid, have told us it's okay, everyone. These products are perfectly safe because we've done all the required tests required by the government. They test them on mice and dogs and then mass release them onto the market. 500,000 chemicals every time. Say, like, when you buy a bunch of grapes from the supermarket, it's got something like 30 different chemicals on it.
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Somebody had asked why beagles. We've talked about this before. It's because they're particularly placid, isn't it?
Why big? They chose them 70 years ago. The idea was to test them on a rodent and a non-rodent. 70 years ago, they chose the beagles because, like you said, they're placid, they're gentle, and they don't bite back. Why we use them today is because they were chosen 70 years ago, and there's been it's institutionalized stupidity. 70 years ago, they chose the beagle, and 70 years on, it's the beagle that's still being used. It's got nothing to do with science. It's to do with the industry, and it's to do with lies.
Absolutely. And this is a conflict to a nation of animal lovers, Alien Big Cat, because we do profess and claim to be a nation of animal lovers, but we do the most heinous things to animals. That is a reality. But John, what can we do on a practical level to stop what's happening on Wednesday? Is there anything we can do?
To be honest, I had no hope at all but in the way that the government have done this. It's so sneaky. But it looks like we're building some sort of opposition. But we have to defeat the government, and the government, it's really bad for a government stature and their ratings, to get defeated. So. Yeah. If we can get 150 MPs along on Wednesday, the Labour whips will make sure there's 151 in the chamber. But please get onto your MP. And that all they have to do is say no. There won't be a debate. So you don't even have to do, even if you were pro-animal testing, take one look at this piece of legislation that they're trying to pass through. It's very badly written. It's against human rights. It will crush the opposition. The opposition in this country, we're on the shoulders of giants. We've had 100 years of opposition to animal testing, and the disgusting Labour Party, just like Tony Blair. Tony Blair did the same thing. Before Tony Blair got in, he promised to have a royal commission into animal testing. And that's what we need. We need openness. Everything about animal testing, even though they call it science, it's always done in secrecy. Science and secrecy, I'm afraid, they just don't belong together. Tony Blair did exactly the same. He saved the laboratory up the road. And now they're trying to save the puppy factory because they spent £4 million on a civil injunction to try and get rid of us. But the High Court judge, I thought he was going to use a sledgehammer and get rid of us. But for one of the first times in my life, a judge listened to the case that we made, and it was a real David and Goliath job, and he didn't crush us. So now they're doing this very, very sneaky. So please get onto your MP and ask them on Wednesday. And lots of MPs will be in Parliament because it's the day that they have parliamentary questions. Stick around for the vote and make sure that they vote no to it.
John, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I truly appreciate it. I think you're amazing.
And let me just say this one last thing. We do parliamentary petition. We're asking people to get onto their MPs. I'm not doing that because I've got any trust in politicians at all. But this is an emergency. This is a sneaky, dirty, filthy trick by Keir Starmer. He fills me with disgust, with absolute disgust. What a dirty, filthy backdoor method they've done,
Got you, John. Got
And
you.
do you know what they're
absolutely.
saying for it? I'll finish with this. Do you know the reason why they say this? They've got to protect the national infrastructure. In the wording, it says because we need to prepare for the next pandemic. It's bullshit and lies. There's not even one scientific paper to link the Beagles with any form of vaccine research, any form of. I'm sure you've discussed vaccines 101 billion times on your program. That's why they're saying that life sciences now needs protecting. When they say life sciences torturing animals because of the preparation for the upcoming pandemic, such massive lies.
Absolutely. Nikki says, preach, brother, and so say all of us. So, yeah, even if you think your MP is the dregs of society, at least put in one email, at least put pressure on them. Let them know that you're watching this. Yes, and MPs are a waste of space. Absolutely, they are.
A total waste of space.
Yeah, exactly. But all we can do is what we can do. This must not happen because, of course, the first thing they'll do is target you lot at MRB.
The first thing.
First thing, absolutely they will. John, you're a star. The legislation, Sarah, is the Life Sciences Reclassification to the Public Order Act 2023. It's an amendment and it's scheduled for this Wednesday. So there you go. That's what it is, Sarah. John, take good care of yourself, everybody. John Curtin. We should all have a bit of John. Oh, amazing.
Nice one, Sonia. Bye-bye.
Take care, darling. Lots of love.
Easy.
Loved you all. Wonderful people out there in the middle of winter. Yes, indeed. So that, of course, has taken up some of my time, but I think I'm going to try and attempt to work through what I still have remaining anyway, which is a fair bit. We may well be here until 11:30, people. And that's the way it goes sometimes. Very interesting. Thank you, first of all, to Pat Mills. Pat Mills is often called the godfather of British comics. And he is doing the Survive Awards. And I'm extremely touched to be nominated in the Survive Awards. And it says about me, she regularly has survivors on her show. Her exposure of the Caldy Island child sexual abuse scandal led to a major investigation. A recent interview with Pat Mills regarding child sexual abuse by the Knights of St. Columba led immediately to the Knights promising an apology. Thank you. There are brilliant people on there, including Emma Catherine, Graham Wilmer, Joanna Britton, Raphael Viola, and the very lovely Dr. Naomi Murphy. I wouldn't mind losing to any one of those. Not at all. Wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. And I talked last week about the death of a child in London as a consequence of circumcision. Well, CPS have issued a draft document and it's about honor-based abuse, forced marriages and harmful practices. And it classes circumcision as a potential crime alongside breast flattening, virginity testing and exorcisms. And Jews and Muslims around the world are in uproar at the idea that we're going to be banning circumcision. They say that this is an attack on their faith. And in fact, Jonathan Arkush, former president of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, who stick their nose into everything, said called the draft wording deeply misleading, warning that it reframes, in their opinion, a foundational mitzvah as an inherently abusive act. Well, what if some of us do think it's an abusive act? F the faith, says Alien. I take your point. It's not only Jews who are in uproar about it, Muslims are as well. The Muslim Council of Britain warned that while safeguards and accreditation are necessary, male circumcision is a lawful practice with recognized religious and cultural foundations and should not be characterized in itself as child abuse. Well, I don't care. I'm characterizing it as child abuse. What are you going to do about that? Right, which kind of brings me on to this story. I'm sure we all remember it. New York synagogue, 2 years on, what happened? So remember that underground tunnel at one of the world's most famous recognized Jewish synagogues in the world, at the Chabad Lubavitch World HQ in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. On January the 8th, 2024, clashes broke out at the world headquarters, and the construction workers had been hired by the synagogue's leaders, and they attempted to fill in a tunnel that students had illegally dug beneath the building. The New York City Police Department was called to intervene. Students fought back. And the official story is a group of students had begun digging the tunnel in the belief that Rabbi Mandelson Schneerson, who died in 1994, is the Messiah. And only by digging through that tunnel can they hope to honor him. That's the official story, right? The world headquarters of the Chabad Lubavitch movement are located at 770 Eastern Parkway in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and often referred to simply as 770. And the Chabad Lubavitch is one of the most influential Orthodox Jewish Hasidic organizations. New York City is home to approximately 200,000 Hasidic Jews, a fraction of the city's Jewish population. There are approximately 1.6 million Jews. New York City boasts a bigger Jewish community than any other city in the world, and nearly half of them live in Brooklyn. And what happened was that the New York City Fire Department received an anonymous tip about 770 in mid-December 2023. They made an inspection of the building on December the 20th. They didn't find the tunnel. Then a local paper reported that there were tunnels there that were protecting the hidden passageways. And then what happened was that they then brought in construction workers to concrete it up. A group of yeshiva students attempted to protect the hidden passageways, and everything kicked off. I've got some videos here. Let's have a look, shall we? So as you can see here, the men are tearing up wood paneling, they're throwing wooden pews, and others were running into the tunnel while it was being filled. Many refused to come out of the tunnel, and as a result, police arrested people. And those arrested were between the ages of 19 and 22. But the fact is, 2 years on, there are still more questions than answered. So what actually happened? Well, these men, if I can find them, I don't know if I can, I will in a minute, but there was lots of other stuff that was going on, important to note, right? Including we saw people escaping via drains. I'm sure you've seen that video. Why are you escaping by a drain? What is it? What has made you escape by a drain? So anyway, what happens? So I thought, let me follow this story. What actually happened to it? Because it appeared to have all but disappeared, which was, which is obviously quite odd, frankly. And so I did. I decided to follow it. And what happened was in January 2025, 12 defendants pleaded guilty to lesser charges. And the lesser charges that nobody has been charged with digging that tunnel. So these people have all been charged with attempting to obstruct the police and the construction workers. And they have agreed to an order of protection that prohibits them from making alterations, excavations, or demolitions to the synagogue for 3 years. So after 3 years, presumably they can continue on. But 4 of the attendants who were arrested, which was Yaakov Rothschild, Yisrael Binyamin, Yereshmiel Blumenfeld, and Menachem Maidenchik, they declined the plea deal. And they were scheduled to face trial in April 2025 on a felony charge that carried a maximum prison sentence of 7 years. So, first of all, first stop online. What happened at the court hearing in April 2025? Well, there's nothing. If you can find something online, send it to me, because there's nothing. So then I started to go through New York court records. There's nothing. What happened with those 4 men? Because it's all been wiped off the newsstands. People are not interested in it. The last mention of any of this, it was January 2025 when 6 and a previous 6 all accepted a plea bargain, essentially pleading guilty to lesser charges. And one of the attorneys for one of the 4 men who had refused to accept the plea deal, he said that the charges were an outrage. He described his client as a participant in a civil dispute that's been going on for many, many years. You can't alter buildings just because you want to. But there's more than that. And he said his client was just a 20-year-old kid. Kids don't decide on their own to take the actions he did without being told to do so by much older and wiser people of authority. So according to what we know, this was a tunnel that stretched some 60 feet long, 8 feet wide. The tunnel connected multiple buildings in the Jewish complex through holes cut into basement walls. And I think I've got that as well, so you can remember it and see it. Here it is, very weird stuff. And of course, what happened was people online realized there was some really weird stuff that was with this viral footage, right? There was children's toys. There was a stroller that could be seen. There were mattresses that came out from behind the wall. That the people involved said those mattresses didn't come out from the tunnel. And we saw the mattresses, by the way, right? The stained mattresses that came out. You can actually see it here. So this is it. I mean, this is quite a lot that's been going on here, right? So this is, and watch this puff of smoke in a second if you can. That feels a little bit like, there, look at that. That looks kind of weird. That feels something spiritual there. Whole thing stinks. Absolutely it does. And then of course there was the issue of, this was what was getting a lot of people exercised. Look, you can see stained mattress being brought out. I'm going to play that again. And what happened was you had the community around this saying these conspiracy theories online, they're passing on, they're promoting blood libels. Actually, there were proper questions that deserved to be asked. First of all, what is that stained mattress about? Yes, it looked like it was in the wall, but nonetheless, what is it about? What were the children's toys down there for? Why was a man escaping out of the sewers? Very odd stuff. But I just thought, well, there must be something that's been said, because just imagine this, right? Imagine if it were any other group or faith that had their own underground tunnel system with bloody mattresses, articles of clothing found in dungeons and tunnels, there would be uproar. But this went very, very quiet indeed. Very quiet indeed. Yes, they are. And so I just thought there must be somebody who said something about it. And I did find somebody, and actually somebody who is at that synagogue. And his name is Rabbi Katz. And I think I've got an image of him here. And I actually found him in a recent YouTube documentary, which is only about 8 months old. So significantly after all of this has taken place. And he was asked about all of this. And I'm going to play it to you and listen to how he deals with it.
Actually around here?
No, there were never tunnels. It was just simply expanding like towards the end.
So that's just another one of those internet things.
Yeah. The Shiva students, they wanted to expand a little bit. It just took on a whole life of its own, and I'm not going to deny that in Crown Heights we like.
Oh, wait, he says, I'm not going to deny that in Crown Heights we like to build. And then he goes on to make a joke about it, say about the cement mixer and saying it was anti-Semitism. And they both laugh about it, but nobody gets to the bottom of it. And this is Rabbi Katz, whose job it is to be a tour guide at 770 at the synagogue. And so that's it. They don't want us to talk about this anymore. I cannot even find court records pertaining to the 4 guys. So what happened with them? Did they take a deal? Was it decided? Because here's what I can absolutely reassure you of, and that is the media have no interest whatsoever in continuing to cover this. And you have to wonder why. You have to wonder why. It's all very creepy. And because what we saw was the tunnels revealed banks of computer equipment, cameras, a high chair, and obviously there was that soiled mattress we saw. There were many questionable items for a tunnel that was said to aid the Messiah returning. Okay. And so very odd indeed, but you can hear how a leading light of that synagogue is like, in Crown Heights, we like to build and cementism and all of that kind of stuff. Nikki, extremely fishy. But also what happened was that the fact checkers, and who checks the fact checkers, right? A USA Today fact check stated that the stained mattress had been removed from behind wood paneling of the synagogue rather than in the tunnel itself. But yes, still, that stain is very interesting. No, that looked like blood to me. I could be wrong. No one noticed what happened in Central Park, says Shug. So very weird indeed. The fact that all mention of this stops in January 2025 is in its own right curious. And the internet largely does not believe the official story. Many believe this is actually about trafficking, about people trafficking, about child abuse. Others say that it is nothing but anti-Semitism. But we have to be allowed to ask questions. Yes, we do. And particularly because at that particular synagogue was Herschel Pekar. He was a renowned Shabbat Hasidic silversmith, and he was accused of extensively being involved in child abuse, including with 5-year-olds. Right. And he was at that exact synagogue, and he died in 2021. And a woman living in Israel alleged that Pekar had sexually abused her on multiple occasions, starting in 1991 when she was just 5 years old. And in New York and in prominent Orthodox communities of Israel and London, allegations of child molestation and rape are widely known. Alleged abusers are school teachers, rabbis, fathers, uncles, figures of male authority. The victims are mostly boys. Rabbi Rosenberg opened a New York City helpline for sex abuse complaints and posted appeals on social media. Rabbi Rosenberg believes around half of young males in Brooklyn's Hasidic community have been victims of sexual assault perpetrated by their elders. So we shall see. That, as far as I'm concerned, though, this video is a PR video on behalf of the Chabad Lubavitch. Bottom line. Right. Nothing is what it seems anymore, says Nikki, and that's a fact. Oh, yes, indeed. Right. I want to talk about, I told you we're going to go a little over this today, but never mind. I've just invented a new segment right now. I can do that because it's my show. It's called Here's How Not to Treat Your Loyal and Valuable Workers, Part 1. So, Debbie worked at Jacobs for 45 years. And she started on the shop floor in 1981. Let's have an image of Debbie in her Jacobs gear. Let's find you, Debbie. Let's find you. Here she is. Here she is in her workwear. This is lovely, Debbie. So she worked at Jacobs for 45 years. She started on the shop floor in 1981. She sometimes worked a 90-hour week at their Liverpool Aintree production plant. She was cleaning, she was filling in, she was a general dog's body. And what happened over time is it went from being a family-run business, which had been originally launched in Waterford in Ireland by William Beale Jacob and his brother Robert. They started their bakery. They relocated to Dublin. And then in 1914, they set up the factory in Aintree, Liverpool to serve the British market. And then what happened was, as it became ever increasingly more successful, they sold it to Pladis, which Pladis is owned by United Biscuits. United Biscuits is like McVitie's, Jaffa Cake, and the parent company is Yildiz Holding in Turkey. And Pladis is a global brand, but what I can tell you is it's not English. Okay, it's not English and doesn't have the same feelings of loyalty for somebody like Debbie, who has been there for 45 years. And this is where it gets to the really awful thing. So first of all, what I'm going to tell you didn't just impact Debbie, it impacted other long-termers there as well. And Debbie's very popular on the shop floor, and she's now about to start a new chapter in life with a dear friend of mine and a supporter of Wake Up, and I wish them all the happiness in the world. But it was him who told me this story. And first of all, Debbie ended up being a single mother on her own. She'd had an awful experience with her husband, but she ended up being a single mother. One of her children was disabled. She raised them on her own. She was working every hour that God sends. This woman is what we would call the salt of the earth in England, right? Even after being ill during C19, she ended up in ICU. Upon returning to Jacob, she was given a warning that she couldn't stay off sick again for 2 years. She was even put onto light duties for a short while, but she still struggled with her health. She gave her best to her job. And after 45 years in the job, people, let me find the image. This is what, I've got to have it here. Why do these things disappear? This is what they gave her. That's cream crackers. That's Jacob biscuits. And I think those are little bits of cheese or butter. That's what they gave her after 45 years of loyal service. And I felt really angry when I heard that. I couldn't even believe it, Randy. I could not even believe it. I said, no, you got to be pulling my leg here. That makes absolutely no sense. But you can see other women also have been given the same gift as well. And I just find that extraordinary. Vanessa, it's so insulting. She's taken it really well. By all accounts, she sounds like an absolutely lovely lady and is about to start a wonderful new chapter in her life with her partner. They are taking the biscuit, Kenneth. What an insult, says Sally. And it is an insult, isn't it? And it's no expense spared, said Humphrey. And I just think that when we have people like, it's awful, Hope Love. It's absolutely, genuinely awful. But when we have people like Debbie in our workforce, right? Debbie, I was 15 when Debbie started at Jacobs. And she's now, retired. She's now left. And exactly, Randy, you will own nothing and you will be happy. I'm actually outraged by that. I think it's really sickening. And I know there are always bigger things to worry and concern ourselves about. But I think that loyalty to your workforce should be something that we should uphold. Marilyn said, at least the ribbon is lovely. I can't believe that. Hope said, companies don't care about people. Free Steamer, there's a Rolex inside it. I said, are you sure it's not gold? Are you sure it's not like gold crackers or something? And Sean, I have to agree with you. We are returning to the worst things from the Victorian era. Unbelievable. Absolutely. Let them eat cake or crackers on this occasion. Blue Nomad, 45 years. Yes, Herbert, I am that old. I'm 61, so I would have been 16. And the only ones making out are the executives. Yes, and that is it. You become just a number, right? The way is clear. Many jobs in one lifetime, because her loyalty, her colleagues' loyalty didn't work for this company at all after they became a global entity. And I just find it really awful. And I just thought, you know what? Let's big her up. Let's big her up, because Debbie is really quite literally, what we consider the backbone of our country. These are the people who have kept the wheels turning regardless. And even when she was sick, she was still there. Kath, it is a disgraceful way to treat loyal staff. Dell suggests they should have been 5 cents a year as a bonus for 45 years. Profit, expense, profit. What's your worth value, says what's normal. It is absolutely disgraceful. So, Debbie, lots of love to you. May you enjoy this well-earned second part of your life with everything that you've humanly got. Lots of love to you all, to Debbie, to Trev and Toby. And sod Jacobs. Oh, Mr. Smith said someone should open a GoFundMe for her. Alien said, workers' power, not even a cracker a year. No company really cares. And that's the take-home message here, right? That's the take-home message, is that they don't care. They don't care. But we do, Debbie. Enjoy the next part of your life, sweetheart. Enjoy it with everything you've got. You have more than earned it. So sod you, Jacobs. I don't even know if I'll be able to buy them again. And I really don't. I feel so aggrieved towards them all. And thank you for all of your chemtrail pictures. I've received so many, so I'm going to have to get them in some kind of order so that I can show them. But thank you. It does appear that they have begun spraying again in earnest. And thank you also to all of those who have watched my Peaches Geldof video. I checked this morning, over 60,000 views since Saturday, which is great for us. Thank you so much. Keep liking, sharing, subscribing. And a huge volume of people. I'd said in that, I think I'm going to do a deep dive into the whole Geldof triangle, etc. And the amount of people saying, yes, please, Sonia, deep dive. Please do a deep dive. And so I will be. That is what I will be doing. And I'm very touched about what people say about me in the comments, by the way. Very touched indeed. I do what I do because I can't help myself. I just feel the need to kind of expose people who abuse their position or who abuse others. It's my thing, really. And Paul Burgess was absolutely on the money about the staggering cost of Ed Miliband's net zero drive. And we discovered this weekend that it's actually going to cost us in the region of 4.5 trillion. That's more than the UK's entire GDP. Astonishing stuff. Yes, astonishing stuff indeed. Thank you again for all your wonderful messages. Right, we are now moving to the closing, you beautiful people. First of all, thank you as always to my donators, to Faye Jennings, to Ian Johnson, to Ashley Potter, to Annabelle Lee, who said to support you in your important work. Keep it up. Thank you, Annabelle. I very much appreciate that. Thank you also for your kindnesses this morning. Danielle Krause, thank you on the super chat. Thank you, Kath Hutton. Thank you for previous super chats, to Sticky Marks, to Peter Folder, to Paul Trainer, to Foboil Moon, to Swiss Miss, to Rosalind Dempsey. I appreciate you all. And I want to end on, sit with it, the power of not reacting. Right. Now, when people say things to you, and it's not necessary to provoke you, it could just be something that you feel that you need to answer immediately. You don't. You can pause. And in fact, it is a fact, and I studied psychology, so I kind of know this, but it's a fact. And that is, if you react, you give away your power. If you respond, you are still in charge. And that is a reality. Many people, when they hear something, whether they like it or not, they want to fire back instantly, maybe to defend themselves, maybe to put their point forward. But the reality is you don't always need to react immediately. And in fact, I would guard against it. It is a fact that many people's need to react quickly, i.e. to defend themselves, is often rooted in some form of trauma. But if you can just give yourself a pause between hearing something and reacting to it, what different world it would be. Part of the reason that social media these days is so toxic is because people react without hearing the full story. They'll read a headline or they'll read something that one of the globalist shills say and they'll assume it's the right thing and they react to that rather than getting the full story. Well, I'm here to tell you that you will serve yourself well, your mind and your body, if you give yourself pause for thought. First of all, you will allow yourself some emotional regulation, because reacting is not good, right? What it creates is this emotional overwhelm, and it increases your anxiety. Increases, what am I saying? Increases the possibility of depression. I keep saying create and increases, and I keep crossing them over for some reason. And it also increases the possibility of just kind of like being under a negative mood, under a negative cloud. But when you stop, you will immediately emotionally regulate yourself better, because you're already saying I'm in charge. So that's really important. You also will allow yourself time to think. You can get clearer thinking, better decision making. Reactionary is exactly it. You know, people often shoot from the hip because their ego has been wounded by what they've, seen or read or heard or whatever. And they go straight into reaction mode. Very bad news indeed. Also, you will reduce stress and negativity. Okay. Really vital. If you stop feeding negativity by being too reactionary, it's amazing what it will do for your mental well-being. You will also cultivate stronger relationships, because sometimes difficult conversations are just very, very difficult, and people will put them off forever. And I can be prone to that. And I've had loved ones who will essentially like, right, that's it. We're having that conversation now. But once you've had time to think, you can build stronger relationships because you care about what you say to that other person. It's also about personal growth and self-control. If you're always just reacting, then you are not growing. You are still whatever, an 8-year-old toddler who's been abused, whatever it is that led to you being overreactionary is still existent in your life. If you can't just receive an email and can't resist just firing straight back, there's something wrong with you. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. What I mean is you could do with some help and some assistance. Okay. And because the reality is, the more time you take to think about it, you will increase your own power and influence in the situation. I see right through people who react too quickly. I immediately know they're insecure. Immediately. I'm not talking about just a conversation like where we go backwards and forwards in WhatsApp or whatever. But if it's a difficult conversation, it involves contentious issues. If people feel the need to react immediately, I see them as the one with less power and insecure in the situation. And there's a reason for that. Psychologically, that is borne out. And by pausing, by taking a moment to respond, you will calm your entire nervous system. That's what you'll do. You will notice your physical and you'll notice your physical sensations. You'll notice your thoughts, and you won't be judgmental of yourself. And this is also about healing yourself as well. So the way to deal with this is identify those triggers. Ask why you feel this way. Often it points to some unmet need, or as I say, some past trauma, and choose your response. Take back control in any situation. Decide on a skillful action. Focus on solutions, whether that involves empathy or stepping away. Whatever, think about it rather than react too quickly to it. You will benefit 100%. The difference between responding and reacting is a choice. It's your choice. When you react, they're in control. When you respond, you are. And that's what's important. We will win because we have to. You're welcome, Lyra. Thank you. Most of mine are to ignore. Absolutely. And as ever, of course, I always want to thank my wonderful patrons, everybody who contributes to this show. I truly appreciate you. And Hollis once said, think before you act, respond, don't react. So if you have to remember that little poem, do so. It will help you, I can assure you. And being secure on your own feet is so scary for people who always run. Yes, Randy, I get that. Face your darkness, integrate it, trust your instincts. Herbert, I love that. That's wonderful. Have a great week ahead, everybody, and heart to you too, Alien Big Cat. Thank you, DJ Markson. Thank you all in the chat. Love you loads, of course, as ever. Take excellent, excellent care of yourself, people. I will see you on Friday. Lots of love. Have a brilliant day.